became a homemaker, we would have to leave this apartment as it was company subsidized. Moving to a similar apartment would significantly increase our rent and moving costs. Honestly, John's salary wasn't that high. If we had children, our financial needs would increase, and I would inevitably need to keep working. Thinking about our situation, I decided to earn as much as I could while I could. Since I was paying the rent, I felt I needed to continue earning. I subtly brought up these points, including the need to move out of the apartment, in a conversation with John. This was probably the first time I contradicted his opinions. Hey, about you wanting me to be a homemaker, I'll take care of the house, but can I continue working until we have kids? I want to save as much money as we can for now. Are you saying my salary isn't enough? Or do you just want more money to spend? It's not like that. Kids are expensive, and I want to save up for that. I can even use my earnings for our living expenses. It's better to have more money, right? Right. Your annual income is $15,000, right? It's not much, just enough for the rent, but it's better than nothing. It's better than mommy around at home. Yes, but thank you. I'll keep working until we have kids. Of course, I'll take care of the house too. Though I felt uneasy about some parts, I managed to convince him to let me keep working. But in hindsight, this might have upset him. Balancing work and household chores was harder than I expected. My days were incredibly busy. I was a full-time employee, not part-time. I woke up early to prepare breakfast, lunch boxes for both of us, and to do some prep for dinner and tidy up the house when I got home. I prepared dinner, heated the bath, and did laundry after John went to sleep. Honestly, there was barely any time for us as a couple, and I began to wonder if this was really what a marriage should be like. On the other hand, Javnan, who acted like a traditional husband, did absolutely nothing at home. He must have seen how busy I was with household chores, but he would just eat dinner, drink beer, and relax when he got home. He'd bathe alone as soon as it was ready, then go to his room. I wished he would help out a bit, given how hard I was working, but I couldn't say anything, fearing he'd tell me to just quit my job. Despite his lack of help at home, I naively hoped he would change once we had kids. However, our relationship had grown distant, making the prospect of having children unlikely. I decided to discuss it with John. Hey, we should start thinking about having kids, right? Kids? You're quite energetic considering you're tired from work and chores. It's not about that. I want to have children. We haven't been married that long. Isn't it too early for kids? Maybe for you, but I'm already over 30. Women have a limited time to have children. It's getting harder to conceive as I get older. It's almost too late. Then we don't need kids. If we have one, you'll expect me to help, right? You know I'm busy with work. I won't help with child rearing. What? Declaring you won't help with child rearing even before they're born is strange, isn't it? I plan to raise them alone, but shouldn't you at least have the intention to help? It's your child too. Child rearing is your job. I'm working to support the family, so I definitely won't help with the kids. You'll just complain that I don't help and that you're doing it alone, making me the bad guy. You must have been indoctrinated with poverty and lots of kids since birth. We're not poor. We don't need kids. End of discussion. John abruptly ended the conversation and went to his room. Standing alone in the living room, I was overwhelmed by tears. Not only was my wish for children rejected, but also my upbringing was mocked. Following this incident, our relationship deteriorated rapidly, and we hardly spoke anymore. There were no children and barely any communication. Maybe it was time to consider divorce, yet a faint image of my once kind husband lingered in my mind, making me wish we could return to the happy couple we used to be. Since then, I tirelessly juggled work and home responsibilities. I was incredibly busy with various tasks. Eventually, I took on a significant project at work, which meant more business trips and further distance from John. One day, as usual, I told him about an upcoming business trip, but his reaction was unlike any other time. I'll be away on a business trip for about 10 days starting tomorrow. Please take care. Another trip? You're always working hard. Take care, even though you must be tired. He was unexpectedly kind, unlike his usual mocking self. He even said with a smile, "Wait for a big surprise when you get back." I had given up on him and was resolved to a decision internally. However, his smile shook my resolve. Our wedding anniversary was approaching, and I thought maybe he had a surprise for that. Despite everything, I hoped he might have changed his heart. I even considered rethinking my stance if he had truly changed. However, my faint hope was shattered by a major incident. When I returned home 10 days later, I faced the first surprise. The front door wouldn't open. The key didn't fit. As I struggled, John spoke from inside. "Karen, right? Surprised. This is the first surprise. I changed the locks, so your key won't work anymore." "What do you mean? Why doesn't my key work?" "Open the door." "Why would I let a stranger into my house?" "I changed the locks, and for your information, we're divorced." "That's the second surprise." A poor wife is useless. Divorce. I never signed any papers. How could you even do this? I just forged your signature. I submitted it with a friend's name as a witness, so you're a stranger now. Got it. Understood. Then we need to discuss property division, right? Right? Property division. I had a document for you to sign. I'll let you in this one last time. John finally opened the door. Inside, there was a document for me to sign, waiving my rights to property division. I thought you'd say, give me property division if you want a divorce. Poor people like you probably saw me as rich. You married me for my wealth, right? I won't fall for that, so waive your rights to the property. What? I never even thought about property division. I hadn't even considered divorce. So you'll also waive your rights to property division, right? How much property do you think a poor person like you has? A few thousand in savings at most. I don't need that. I have more assets, so if anyone is doing the dividing, it would be me giving money to you, not the other way around. Don't you get it? Is that so? Well, that doesn't matter. Let's change the document to reflect mutual renunciation of property rights and make it a public document, I retorted stubbornly. Afterward, John redid the document on his computer, deciding to make it a public document. However, it would be some time before we could submit it. I decided to pack my things and leave the house for the moment. As I was leaving, you scorned me until the end. You are poor. I thought about throwing away your belongings while you were on your trip, but you barely had anything. Always wearing the same clothes, typical of the poor. The reason my belongings were few at that time was deliberate, part of my plan. The only unexpected thing was John changing the locks without my knowledge. A few days later, as expected, a panicked John called me. Karen, what have you done? What do you mean? I haven't done anything. Why are you panicking? I have a lot of questions. First, I was told to leave the apartment. Oh, you were still living there. That's not allowed. It's a new month. You're trespassing. Trespassing? But it's my house. Are you okay? Did you forget that was a company apartment I rented? I was the leaseholder, so naturally, you can't live there anymore. That's ridiculous. How could you do this? I can't believe you didn't know. I'm not the one who should be accused of doing things on my own. Didn't I tell you that you can't just change the locks of a rental apartment? It's my house. I can change the locks if I want. Didn't you listen? It was my leased apartment. Even if you were the leaseholder, the owner is the apartment manager. You can't change the locks without informing them. Is that so? Also, I terminated the lease while you were away. You terminated it so early, I was allowed to live there until this month. I was planning to return, but now you've unlawfully altered someone else's property, which could be considered criminal damage. Wait, criminal damage? Is that why the police are at the front door now? I'm too scared to open it. I replied calmly, so the police did come. Don't worry, it's probably not for trespassing or criminal damage. It's better to talk to them. Why do you know about the police? Because I reported you for filing the divorce papers yourself. It seems like you've committed crimes like forgery and fraudulent use of a private document. Divorce papers can be filed by one person, but only with mutual agreement and personal signatures. Since you forged my signature and the witnesses, it's obvious that it's a crime. John seemed unaware of his guilt. I continued pressing further. So the divorce papers you submitted are invalid, and your marriage with Susan can't happen either. How do you know about Susan? Did you think I knew nothing? I had a private detective agency thoroughly investigate your affair with Susan. It was a busy time at work, and coordinating with the agency was tough. Plus, you've even held a grand wedding ceremony while I was supposedly on a business trip. Are you saying your business trip was a lie? Yes, I took leave from work despite being busy to do some research and prepare documents. I knew about you bringing Susan home. It would have been impossible to gather this evidence while working. After I revealed everything, John was speechless and seemed quite downcast, even over the phone. Then he pleaded with me. Please don't tell Susan I'm divorced. Why would I? There's no such fact to tell. Really? Thank you. Are you misunderstanding something? When did you become divorced? That fake divorce paper is invalid, remember. So legally you're still my husband, not divorced. What? Since you committed adultery while legally my husband, Susan needs to pay compensation. I sent the demand for reparation to her house yesterday by express delivery. She didn't know you were married, right? I can't withdraw the claim at this point. I already knew Susan believed John was single, but I deliberately sent the reparation demand anyway. Since Susan hadn't contacted me yet, she likely hadn't received the letter. It should arrive soon. Should you be on the phone with me when you also have to deal with the police? You're busy. I'll ignore the police. I won't be arrested. I'm going to Susan's house now to get the letter back before she or her family can accept it, he said, hanging up abruptly. He probably went straight to Susan's house to wait for the postman at the front door. I knew it would be futile because the letter was sent as registered mail to Susan only. Even if he waited for the postman, he couldn't receive it. A few hours later, a dispirited John called me. According to him, there was an incident when the postman arrived. Finally, I'll take that envelope. Who are you? You don't live here, right? I'm practically a resident here since I'm married. I have the right to receive the mail. I see, but I can't give you this envelope. It's registered mail for Susan only. What? Give it to me. Absolutely not. If you're so eager, ask Susan for permission. What's going on here? Susan asked as she approached. Oh, John, what's all this noise? What's happening? Susan, this is registered mail for you. This man insisted on taking it. Sorry for the disturbance. Now I'll be on my way. What's this? A demand for reparation. John, you were married. What's going on here? Sorry, it's just, she's an ex-wife from a long time ago. I was embarrassed to say I'm divorced. I'm sorry for keeping it secret. But it's strange, isn't it? We haven't been dating long, and a demand for reparation. If you were divorced before we started dating, there shouldn't be any problem, right? Well, my ex-wife is crazy. Maybe she's demanding reparation out of spite because I got married. That was the excuse he gave, but such a lie was quickly exposed. The envelope included a letter I wrote along with my contact information. Susan called me directly, and in that call, I told her about the affair, the invalid divorce, and that they had a wedding ceremony while he was still married to me. Although they had a wedding ceremony, they hadn't submitted the marriage registration yet. John wanted to submit it on a good luck day, so it was still pending. He probably delayed submitting the marriage registration due to uncertainty about whether the divorce was finalized. After being exposed, John fled from Susan's house and shamelessly contacted me again. I still had something to tell him, so we agreed to meet at a nearby cafe. As soon as I arrived, John said, Karen, please withdraw the reparation claim. Let's pretend we've been separated for a long time and officially divorced now. I can apologize to Susan for being secretly divorced and maybe cover it up. You think I'm desperate to stay married to you? I was going to file for divorce anyway, but since you cheated, you'll pay reparation. Just trying to extort money from me, huh? Typical of the poor, you have such a poor heart. You're talking nonsense. Depending on my answer, everything can change. There's still an option where we don't divorce. If I say no, you can't reject it, meaning you can't marry Susan and your marital status will be exposed. Fine, I'll pay the reparation. Just divorce me now. Sign here then. About property division. Property division? How much more do you want to take from me? Reparation should be enough. Remember we agreed to waive property division, right? So let's make it official. All right, you're not as bad as I thought. Thank you. We then went to a public notary, made a public document for reparation and property division, and then to the city hall to submit the divorce papers, finalizing our divorce. Relieved, I exchanged final words with John. Glad we don't have to divide property. What are you saying? I'm the one who benefits from that. By the way, you even have assets. After paying me reparation, Susan will also claim damages. She mentioned charging you for the wedding expenses. That's impossible. I'm marrying Susan. She can't claim that. We're divorced now, so there should be no problem. Still living in a fantasy. You committed marriage fraud. You had a wedding while still married. You think Susan still believes you? Marriage fraud? That's ridiculous. Susan will believe me. Believe that if you want. I heard from Susan directly. Also, weren't the guests at your wedding paid actors? You still owe them. You knew about that. I haven't paid them yet. What does it matter to you? You could have just taken property division and been better off. That's what I wanted to tell you. Even if we had divided property, you would have benefited more. What are you talking about, poor woman? Your family is poor and you only make $15,000 a year, right? Even if you got a raise, it would be barely $20,000. You don't have any property. You keep calling me poor, so I thought you might be mistaken. Yes, my salary is indeed $15,000, but you know I work for a foreign company, right? It seems you have no interest in me, but I became a director of the American branch. It's not $115,000 per year, but per month, $155,000 per month. So that's an annual income of $100,000. You're still bad with numbers. How do you manage to keep a job? It's $1.8 million a year. $1.8 million? That can't be true. Of course it is. I haven't had the chance to spend such an amount, so I've been saving it for the future. The savings from before our marriage aren't part of the property division, but there's still a considerable amount since our marriage. I could have received half of that in the property division. You were my destiny after all. I'll get the divorce papers corrected. Are you okay? After all the contempt, you think I'd gladly undo the divorce? If you have that much money, you don't need to claim reparation, right? It's just a small amount for you. He who laughs at a cent will weep for a cent. This reparation is for the mental anguish you caused me. Honestly, I'd like to claim more. Since we've made it official, make sure to pay it, even in installments. I'll be penniless. Also, don't go back to that apartment. Your belongings should have been moved to your parents' house by now. You thought I had few belongings, but that was because I had already moved most of them. Were you that indifferent to me? I can't have so little, so I have to go back to my parents' house. They don't know anything yet, do they? Let me explain. Don't say anything. I've already told them everything. It's only right to explain why we're divorcing. Oh, and your father said not to ever step over our threshold again. So I have nowhere to go. He collapsed, and I left the cafe. Later, I heard he caused trouble at the police station. Despite my advice, he went back to the apartment and sat there aimlessly until the manager called the police. He was taken away, though I'm not sure if it was for obstructing public duties, trespassing, or for the falsified divorce papers. Eventually, his parents took responsibility for him. After talking with me and learning about Susan, they decided that apologizing and paying damages to Susan's family came first. They went to Susan's house, knelt in front of her family, and settled everything without pressing charges for marriage fraud, even paying for the wedding expenses. I had expected them to sue, so it was disappointing they didn't. So I decided to pursue legal action against John for forging the divorce papers. John offered a settlement, but I didn't withdraw the lawsuit. I didn't want him to think everything could be solved with money. I wanted him to understand the gravity of his actions. Even if it cost time and money, I left everything to my lawyer, so it wasn't too burdensome for me. Dan was exposed for his actions and the marriage fraud at his company, leading to his eventual firing. He ended up living at his parents' home, working all day at a relative's construction company. His father took all his earnings, leaving him with no income. I thought his parents wouldn't abandon him, but they were stricter than I expected. They paid my reparation and Susan's compensation, planning to make him work like a horse until he repaid everything. He lived in a shed-like place with no electricity, receiving only $5 per day for food deducted from his salary. They planned to disown and kick him out once he repaid everything. A harsh fate. After years of hard work, I was offered a position at the head office abroad, so I moved overseas after the divorce was finalized. I worried John might come to me for help or harbor resentment, but moving abroad alleviated those concerns. I thought work would be my partner for a while, but soon I found a new relationship. I'm now dating a foreign executive at our head office, and I'm pregnant with plans to marry soon. I told him everything about my past and my ex-husband, and he's understanding. I'll take maternity leave and plan to return to work later, supported by him. He's enthusiastic about taking paternity leave and co-parenting, showing a different cultural perspective. After being tormented by my ex-husband, I finally feel I'm grasping true happiness and confidence in building the happy family I always dreamed of. Many suffer due to selfish spouses. While divorce isn't always the right choice, enduring silence isn't a virtue. It's important to know that honest discussions can lead to resolutions, and sometimes divorce is a necessary option.
The sound of wine glasses clinking and laughter filled my living room, until my mother-in-law's sharp voice cut through the joy like a knife through butter. Really, Sadie? A slumber party at your age? Don't you think it's time to grow up? I'm Sadie, a children's book author, and at 32, I was hosting what had become a monthly tradition with my closest friends. We'd spread blankets on the floor, open a few bottles of wine, and share stories late into the night. It was my escape, my sanctuary, at least until Elizabeth decided to make an unannounced visit. Elizabeth, I scrambled to my feet, nearly knocking over my wine glass. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow's dinner. She stood in my doorway, perfectly coiffed as always, her designer handbag hanging from her arm like a shield of superiority. Clearly, I thought I'd surprise Cole, but I see he's not here. He's working late at the office, I explained, watching my friends exchange uncomfortable glances. Would you like to join us? Join what exactly? This juvenile display? Elizabeth's eyes swept across my living room, taking in the scattered pillows, half-empty pizza boxes, and my friends in their pajamas. I suppose this is what happens when you spend your days writing children's stories instead of pursuing a real career. Ava, my best friend since college, stood up. Actually, Sadie's latest book just hit the bestseller list. Oh yes, I heard. Elizabeth's smile didn't reach her eyes. A story about a purple unicorn who can't fly. How profound. My cheeks burned. Rainbow the unicorn helps children understand it's okay to be different. Different is one word for it. Elizabeth set her bag down with deliberate precision. When Cole married you, I had hoped you'd eventually pursue something more substantial. A law degree, perhaps, or medical school. Instead, you're having pajama parties and writing about magical horses. Madison, Elizabeth's own niece, spoke up from her spot on the floor. Aunt Elizabeth, that's not fair. Life isn't fair, dear. Elizabeth cut her off. And enabling this behavior isn't helping anyone, especially not Sadie. I felt something snap inside me. 6 years of biting my tongue, of smiling through her backhanded compliments and thinly veiled insults, finally reached a breaking point. My behavior? I stepped forward, my voice steadier than I felt. You mean my successful career as an author? My marriage to your son, which has never been happier? Or maybe you're referring to these monthly gatherings where I maintain meaningful friendships instead of judging others from my moral high ground? The room fell silent. Elizabeth's face tightened, that familiar look of disapproval deepening the lines around her mouth. I see Cole's absence has made you bold, she said quietly. But someone needs to speak truth here. You're living in a fantasy world, Sadie. Writing children's books is a hobby, not a career. And these, she gestured to my friends, little gatherings are hardly the mark of a mature woman. Get out. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Excuse me? You heard me. My hands were shaking, but my voice remained firm. This is my home, and these are my friends. You don't get to come in here uninvited and insult us. Not anymore. Elizabeth's eyes narrowed. I'll be sure to tell Cole about this warm welcome when I see him tomorrow. Please do, I replied. Tell him exactly how you showed up unannounced to criticize his wife's career and friendships. I'm sure he'd love to hear all about it. She gathered her bag with rigid dignity. Well, I can see this evening is a waste of everyone's time. I'll see you all tomorrow at dinner. Try to dress appropriately, Sadie. No unicorn pajamas. After she left, the silence lingered until Ava whispered, Holy shit, Sadie. I collapsed onto the couch, my heart pounding. I just kicked out my mother-in-law. Madison crawled over and squeezed my hand. She deserved it. You know that, right? I nodded, but my mind was already racing ahead to tomorrow's dinner. Elizabeth would never let this go. She'd find a way to twist it, to make me look like the villain. Unless... I need to find something, I heard myself say. Something that will make her understand she's not as perfect as she thinks she is. Ava topped off my wine glass. What did you have in mind? I took a long sip, remembering a conversation I'd overheard at last year's family reunion. Something about Elizabeth's past, a scandal that was quickly hushed up. I don't know yet, but I'm done letting her make me feel small. It's time she learned what it feels like to be on the receiving end of judgment. Looking back, that was the moment everything changed. I didn't know it then, but my decision to stand up to Elizabeth would unravel a secret she'd kept buried for decades and change our family forever. The town library's basement archive smelled like old paper and secrets. I'd been researching local history for my next children's book when Madison's text from last week's slumber party caught my eye. Remember what Uncle Teddy mentioned about Aunt Elizabeth at last year's reunion? Check the summer of 1975. Need any help? Carol, the elderly librarian, peered over my shoulder at the stack of newspapers. Just browsing, I said, but something made me add, though I am curious about any society columns from the summer of 75, particularly around the country club. Carol's eyes lit up. Oh, that was quite a summer. The scandal with the Snyder family. She trailed off, catching herself. But I shouldn't gossip. My heart quickened. The Snyder family? Let me fetch those archives for you, dear. She disappeared between the shelves, returning with a heavy-bound volume. Lawrence Snyder was quite the talk of the town back then. Such a shame about his engagement. I flipped through the yellowed pages until a familiar face stopped me cold. There, in a grainy black-and-white photo, stood a young Elizabeth at some garden party. But it wasn't her presence that made my hands shake. It was the way she was looking at the man beside her, their bodies angled toward each other with unmistakable intimacy. The caption read, Lawrence Snyder and fiancée Margaret attend the annual summer solstice ball. Margaret, I whispered. Carol nodded. Lawrence's fiancée. They were supposed to get married that August, but... She glanced around conspiratorially. Well, let's just say the wedding never happened. I dug deeper, finding more photos, more stories. Elizabeth appeared in several, always hovering near Lawrence, always with that same look of barely concealed longing. My phone buzzed. Madison. Find anything interesting? You could say that, I typed back. Your aunt had quite the summer romance. Meet me at Joe's Coffee in 20. There's more. 20 minutes later, I slid into a booth across from Madison, who was already nursing a latte. "Spill," I said. She leaned forward. "Mom told me the story years ago. Lawrence and Elizabeth were having an affair that whole summer. Everyone knew, but nobody talked about it openly. Then Margaret caught them together at the boathouse. What happened? The engagement was called off, obviously. Lawrence left town, Margaret moved to Boston, and Elizabeth..." Madison stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "She married Uncle Richard 3 months later. My mom says she spent the last 40 years pretending it never happened." I sat back, processing. Does Cole know? No one in our generation knows except me. The family buried it deep. Madison's eyes met mine. "But Lawrence moved back to town last month. He bought that big house on Maple Street." My phone buzzed again. "Cole, Mom's still upset about last night. Says you were disrespectful." I showed Madison the text. "Your aunts spent years judging me for not being proper enough, for not fitting her image of the perfect daughter-in-law. Meanwhile, she's been hiding this all along. What are you going to do?" I thought about every snide comment, every disapproving look, every time Elizabeth had made me feel less than worthy. The family reunion's this weekend. Maybe it's time for some truth-telling. "Sadie." Madison's voice held a warning note. "Be careful. This could blow up in your face." "I'm not trying to destroy her," I said, realizing as I spoke that it was true. I just want her to stop acting so superior, to acknowledge that she's human too. And if Cole gets angry, he deserves to know who his mother really is. I pulled out my notebook, jotting down details. "Do you think Lawrence would talk to me?" Madison's eyes widened. "You're not seriously going to..." "I'm going to visit him tomorrow." I closed my notebook with determination. Elizabeth needs to understand she can't keep judging others while pretending her own past doesn't exist. "This is going to be explosive," Madison warned, "but I've got your back. And honestly, maybe it's time someone stood up to Aunt Elizabeth." As I drove home, my mind raced with possibilities. The annual Hudson family reunion was famous for its drama, but this year would be different. This year, the perfect Elizabeth would finally face her own imperfections. My phone rang. Cole again. "Hey, love, everything okay?" Mom seemed pretty upset when she called. "Everything's fine," I said, thinking of the photos in the archive. "But honey, we need to talk when you get home. There's something you should know about your mother." The silence on the other end lasted a moment too long. "What kind of something?" "The kind that explains a lot about why she is the way she is." I pulled into our driveway, seeing our house lights glowing warmly in the dusk. And maybe, if we're lucky, the kind that might finally change things between us. The Hudson estate loomed before us, its manicured lawns dotted with relatives in their Sunday best. Cole squeezed my hand as we walked up the driveway. After our talk last night, he'd been unusually quiet. "You okay?" I asked. "Still processing," he murmured. "I just can't believe my mother would..." "Cole! Sadie!" Elizabeth's voice rang out across the lawn, artificially bright. She swept toward us in a powder blue dress, arms outstretched. "You're late." "Traffic," Cole said, accepting her hug stiffly. Elizabeth's smile tightened when she turned to me. "Sadie, dear, I trust you're feeling more mature today?" Before I could respond, Teddy appeared with a tray of champagne. "First round's up. Who needs a drink?" "God, yes," Cole muttered, grabbing 2 glasses and handing one to me. We made our way through the crowd of relatives exchanging pleasantries. I spotted Madison by the buffet table, deep in conversation with her mother. She caught my eye and gave a subtle nod, our signal that Lawrence had indeed accepted her invitation to stop by later. "Sadie," Ava called out, waving from a cluster of younger cousins. "Come here, we're telling embarrassing stories about our significant others." I started toward her, but Elizabeth's hand caught my arm. "A word, dear?" She steered me toward a quiet corner of the garden. "About the other night. Elizabeth, Let me finish." Her perfectly manicured nails dug slightly into my arm. "I've been thinking about what you said, about your career. Perhaps I was hasty in my judgment." I blinked, thrown off guard. "Really?" "Indeed. After all, someone needs to write those little books." She patted my hand condescendingly. "And you seem to have found your level." The familiar anger bubbled up. "My level?" "Sadie," Madison's voice cut through the tension. Aunt Elizabeth, sorry to interrupt, but Uncle Richard's looking for you. Something about the catering? Elizabeth's lips pursed. We'll continue this later, dear. She glided away, leaving the scent of expensive perfume in her wake. Madison waited until she was out of earshot. He's here. Lawrence just pulled up. My heart jumped. Does Elizabeth know? Not yet. He's waiting in the garden house. Madison glanced around nervously. Are you sure about this? I watched Elizabeth across the lawn, holding court among her admirers, more sure than ever. The garden house was a small Victorian structure, filled with potted plants and wicker furniture. Lawrence stood when we entered, and I was struck by how distinguished he looked, tall and silver-haired with kind eyes. You must be Sadie, he said, extending his hand. Madison explained everything. Thank you for coming, I said. I know this must be awkward. He smiled sadly. Less awkward than 40 years of pretending it never happened. He sat down, gesturing for us to join him. I assume you have questions. Just one, really. I leaned forward. Why did you come back? Unfinished business. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Letters. Elizabeth wrote them that summer. I thought she might want them back. Madison gasped softly. You kept them? All this time? Some stories don't end. They just pause. He handed me the envelope. Use them wisely, Sadie. Elizabeth isn't the villain you think she is. I don't think she's a villain, I said. I just want her to stop acting like she's perfect. A commotion outside made us all freeze. Through the window, I saw Elizabeth standing on the path, her face draining of color as she stared at the garden house. Lawrence? Her voice carried through the glass, barely a whisper. He stood, straightening his jacket. That's my cue. Wait, I started, but he was already moving toward the door. Elizabeth, he said simply as he stepped outside. The garden fell silent. Relatives stopped mid-conversation, drinks halfway to their lips, watching the scene unfold. What are you doing here? Elizabeth's voice shook. Uncle Richard invited me. Lawrence's voice was gentle. It's been a long time, Lizzie. The childhood nickname seemed to break something in Elizabeth. She took a step backward, then another. I have to. She turned and fled toward the house. Mom, Cole called after her, but she didn't stop. I emerged from the garden house, the envelope heavy in my hands. Cole looked at me, then at Lawrence, understanding dawning on his face. Is this what you were planning? He asked quietly. Not exactly, I admitted, but maybe it's better this way. Teddy appeared beside us, looking worried. Elizabeth's locked herself in the study. Richard's trying to talk to her. Madison touched my arm. What now? I looked down at the envelope, thinking of Elizabeth's face when she saw Lawrence. For the first time, I'd seen real emotion crack through her perfect facade. Not just shock or anger, but pain. Deep, decades-old pain. Now, I said, we wait. The truth's already out there. The rest is up to her. The party continued around us, but the atmosphere had shifted. Everyone was watching, waiting, wondering what would happen when Elizabeth finally emerged from the study. And I realized, with a sudden clarity, that this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about something much more complicated. The study door remained closed for an hour before Cole finally had enough. I need to talk to her, he said, pulling away from where we'd been sitting in the garden. I followed him, the envelope of letters still clutched in my hand. Wait, let me come with you. Inside the house, we found Richard slumped in a hallway chair. She won't open the door, he said, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Not even for me. Cole knocked softly. Mom, it's me. Silence. Mom, please, we need to talk about this. The lock clicked. The door opened just enough for Elizabeth's voice to drift out. Just you, Cole. He glanced at me apologetically, but I shook my head. No, I said firmly, stepping forward. All of us. No more secrets. A long pause followed before the door swung open. Elizabeth sat behind the massive oak desk, her makeup perfectly intact despite everything. Only her white-knuckled grip on a crystal tumbler betrayed her distress. I suppose you're enjoying this, she said to me, her voice brittle. Actually, no. I placed the envelope on her desk. These belong to you. Her hand trembled as she touched the yellowed paper. Where did you? Lawrence kept them, all these years. Cole moved closer to his mother. Why didn't you ever tell me? Tell you what? Elizabeth's laugh was harsh. That your mother was the town's scandal? That I nearly destroyed 2 families with my foolishness? That you're human, I said quietly. That you made mistakes, just like everyone else. She looked up sharply. Is that what this is about? Teaching me a lesson? At first, yes. I met her gaze steadily. I wanted you to feel as small as you've made me feel all these years. But seeing you with Lawrence today, I shook my head. This isn't about revenge anymore. Then what is it about? Her voice cracked slightly. Understanding. Cole pulled up a chair beside her desk. Mom, you've spent my whole life pushing everyone to be perfect, to live up to some impossible standard. Was it because you were trying to make up for what happened? Elizabeth's hand shook as she opened the envelope, pulling out the first letter. Her own youthful handwriting stared back at her. I was so young, she whispered, so sure I knew what love was supposed to be. What happened? Cole asked gently. Lawrence was engaged to Margaret. It wasn't planned. But we fell in love. She touched the letter softly. When Margaret found out, the scandal nearly ruined both families. Your grandfather gave me a choice. Marry Richard, who had always cared for me, or be cut off completely. So you chose security, I said. I chose survival. Elizabeth's eyes met mine. And I've spent 40 years making sure no one could ever question my choices again, including you, Sadie. The truth of it hung in the air between us. But Mom, Cole said, pushing everyone away, demanding perfection, it hasn't made you happy? No, she admitted quietly. It hasn't. A knock at the door made us all turn. Madison stood there with Lawrence. I'm sorry, he said. I shouldn't have come. Elizabeth stood so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. Why did you come back? Because I never stopped wondering, what if? He stepped into the room. Because I thought maybe, after all these years, we could at least stop pretending it never happened. I can't do this, Elizabeth whispered, but she didn't move away when he approached the desk. You don't have to do anything, he said gently, but maybe it's time to stop punishing yourself and everyone around you for choices made 40 years ago. I touched Cole's arm. We should give them privacy. As we turned to leave, Elizabeth's voice stopped us. Sadie. I looked back. I'm sorry, she said, and for the first time since I'd known her, there wasn't a trace of judgment in her eyes. For everything. In the hallway, Cole pulled me close. Did that really just happen? I think it did. I leaned into him, emotionally drained. What happens now? Now? Richard's voice made us jump. He stood from his chair, straightening his jacket. Now we go back to the party and give them time to talk. Some conversations are 40 years overdue. As we walked back to the garden, I heard Elizabeth's laugh drift through the study window, not her usual controlled social laugh, but something real and unexpected. Madison fell into step beside us. Well, that was intense. Think she'll be okay? I asked. I think, Cole said slowly, that my mother might finally let herself be something better than okay. She might let herself be real. The party continued around us, but something had shifted. The perfect facade of the Hudson family had cracked, and through those cracks, something more authentic was beginning to shine through. I squeezed Cole's hand, thinking about the power of hidden truths and the courage it takes to face them. Sometimes I realized the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's forcing someone to finally be honest with themselves. The annual family toast was a Hudson tradition, and despite everything that had happened, Elizabeth insisted on maintaining it. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn, the family gathered around the garden terrace. Where is she? Cole whispered, scanning the crowd. Still in the study with Lawrence, Madison replied, but Uncle Richard just went to get them. Moments later, Elizabeth emerged, Lawrence a respectful distance behind her. Her hair was slightly mussed, her eyes rimmed red, but she held herself with the same regal posture as always. Richard handed her a champagne glass, and she stepped up to the terrace steps. I'd like to propose a toast, she began, her voice carrying across the hushed gathering. But then she paused, her practiced smile faltering. The silence stretched uncomfortably until I found myself stepping forward. Actually, Elizabeth, may I? She looked at me with surprise, then gave a small nod. I raised my glass, heart pounding. To family, I said. Not the perfect version we pretend to be, but the real, messy, complicated people we are. Elizabeth's hand trembled slightly on her glass. To the mistakes that shape us, I continued, and the courage it takes to face them. I met Elizabeth's eyes. To second chances, and the wisdom to recognize when it's time to let go of old masks. To second chances, Lawrence echoed softly from the back. Elizabeth's composure cracked. I need to say something. She stepped forward, her voice unsteady. For years, I've stood here giving toasts about family values and proper behavior. But today, she looked around at the faces watching her. Today, I need to tell the truth. A murmur rippled through the crowd. 40 years ago, I made choices that hurt people I cared about. Her eyes found Lawrence's. I've spent decades trying to be perfect to make up for it, and in doing so, I've hurt others. She turned to me, especially those who reminded me that perfection is impossible. Cole squeezed my hand. Sadie, Elizabeth said, I owe you an apology. A real one, not the hollow words I offered earlier. Your authenticity, your willingness to be yourself, it threatened me because it reminded me of who I used to be. Before I buried that part of myself under rules and expectations. I hadn't expected this. Elizabeth, please, let me finish. She straightened her shoulders. I've been horrible to you. I've criticized your career, your choices, your very nature. But the truth is, you've achieved something I never could. The courage to be genuinely yourself. Tears pricked at my eyes as she continued. So yes, let's toast to second chances. Elizabeth raised her glass again. To letting go of perfect facades. To my remarkable daughter-in-law, who had the courage to force me to face my past. And to everyone I've hurt with my judgment and criticism, I am truly sorry. The garden was silent except for a few sniffles. Mom, Cole said, his voice thick with emotion. Elizabeth turned to him. And to you, my son, I'm sorry for never telling you the truth, for making you think you had to be perfect to be loved. Lawrence stepped forward then, and the crowd parted for him. To Elizabeth, he said quietly, who was always perfect exactly as she was. Richard cleared his throat. To my wife, he added, whom I've loved through all her imperfections, just as she's loved through mine. Glasses clinked as the toasts rippled through the family. I watched as decades of tension seemed to dissolve in the fading sunlight. Elizabeth made her way to me through the crowd. I suppose you think I deserved this public confession. Actually, I said, I think you deserve the chance to finally be free of it. She studied me for a long moment. You know, I always wondered why Cole chose you. Now I understand. You see people for who they really are, don't you? I try to. Even when they're being absolutely awful to you? Especially then, I smiled. Usually means they're hiding something. Elizabeth laughed, a real laugh, like the one I'd heard from the study. Well, you certainly figured me out. She touched my arm gently. I can't promise I'll change overnight. Old habits? Die hard? I finished. That's okay, I'm not going anywhere. No, she said softly. I suppose you're not. She glanced over at Lawrence, who was deep in conversation with Richard. None of us can change the past, but perhaps we can stop letting it poison the present. As the party continued around us, I watched Elizabeth move through the crowd, stopping to speak quietly with various family members. She was different now, softer somehow, more human. The perfect mask had cracked, and underneath, I caught glimpses of the young woman from those old photographs, the one who knew how to love freely and laugh without restraint. Maybe that was the real revenge, not destroying someone's facade, but helping them remember who they were before they built it. As twilight settled over the garden, small groups formed and reformed, decades of family secrets suddenly finding their way into the open. I sat with Madison and Ava on the terrace steps, watching the aftermath of Elizabeth's confession unfold. Did you see Aunt Margaret's face during the toast? Madison whispered, nodding toward a stern-faced woman in navy blue. I thought she was going to explode. Wait, that's Margaret. I straightened up. Lawrence's ex-fiancée? The one and only. Ava leaned in. Apparently, she RSVPs to every family event, but hasn't actually shown up in years. Until today. Margaret stood alone, clutching her wine glass like a weapon as she watched Elizabeth and Lawrence talking quietly by the rose garden. "Should someone do something?" I asked. "Too late," Madison muttered as Margaret began striding toward them. "Well, well." Margaret's voice carried across the garden. "Quite the performance, Elizabeth. 40 years of pretending to be better than everyone, and now suddenly you're Mother Teresa?" Elizabeth turned slowly. "Margaret, I didn't know you were here." "Clearly." Margaret's laugh was bitter. "I wouldn't have missed this for the world. The great Elizabeth Hudson finally admitting she's just as flawed as the rest of us." Lawrence stepped forward. "Margaret, please." "Oh, don't Margaret, please me." She jabbed a finger at his chest. "You don't get to play peacemaker, not after what you two did." Cole appeared beside me. "Should we intervene?" "No," I said, touching his arm. "I think this needs to happen." Elizabeth squared her shoulders. "You're right, Margaret. What we did was unforgivable." "Unforgivable?" Margaret's voice rose. "Do you have any idea what it was like? The whispers, the pitying looks, having to leave town because I couldn't bear to see you playing happy families with Richard?" "I know," Elizabeth said quietly. "And I'm sorry. Not just for what happened, but for spending 40 years pretending I was somehow morally superior to make up for it." "Sorry doesn't erase the past." "No," Lawrence said, "it doesn't. But maybe it's time we all stopped letting the past control our present." Margaret turned on him. "Easy for you to say. You got to leave. Start fresh." "Fresh?" Lawrence's laugh was hollow. "I've spent 40 years wondering if I made the biggest mistake of my life. There's nothing fresh about that." A crowd had gathered now, watching the drama unfold. Richard stepped forward, surprising everyone. "Margaret," he said gently, "we were all young, we all made mistakes. But carrying this anger, it's only hurting you." "How can you defend them?" she demanded. "She betrayed me, he humiliated me, and you just married her anyway." "Yes," Richard nodded, "because I loved her. Even knowing everything. Sometimes love means accepting people's imperfections." Elizabeth reached for his hand, tears in her eyes. "It's easy to hold on to anger," I found myself saying, stepping forward. "Trust me, I know. I've spent years angry at Elizabeth for making me feel less than worthy." Elizabeth flinched. "But today," I continued, "I saw something different. I saw someone brave enough to finally face their mistakes, to apologize, to try to make things right." Margaret's hands trembled. "I don't know how to let it go." "Then don't," Lawrence said. "Not all at once. But maybe start by sharing a drink with old friends. Talk about what really happened. Let us apologize properly." "We owe you that much," Elizabeth added. "All of us do." Margaret looked between them, decades of pain visible in her expression. Finally, her shoulders sagged. "I suppose 40 years is a long time to be angry." "Come," Richard said, gesturing toward the house. "Let's talk in the study, all of us." As they walked away, Cole wrapped his arm around me. "How did this become so complicated?" "Family usually is," Madison said, appearing beside us. "But you know what? I think this needed to happen. All of it." Ava nodded. "Sometimes you have to break something completely to fix it properly." We watched as the four of them disappeared into the house. The party continued around us, but there was a different energy now, as if a heavy cloud had finally lifted. "You know," Cole said thoughtfully, "I've never seen my mother look so real." "Real is good," I replied, thinking of all the times Elizabeth had criticized me for being too authentic, too unpolished. "Real means there's hope." Madison raised her glass. "To real families?" "To real families," we echoed. As the stars began to appear above us, I thought about how revenge had transformed into something else entirely. Instead of exposing Elizabeth's past to hurt her, we'd somehow created space for healing, not just for her, but for everyone touched by that long-ago summer. Sometimes the truth doesn't destroy us. Sometimes it sets us free. The study door opened an hour later, and the four of them emerged looking exhausted but somehow lighter. Elizabeth's eyes were red, but she was smiling, a real smile that reached her eyes. Margaret walked beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "Sadie," Elizabeth called out, "could you join us for a moment?" I followed them into the study where Lawrence and Richard were already pouring fresh drinks. The tension from earlier had transformed into something more contemplative. "We've been talking," Elizabeth said, settling into an armchair, "about the past, about mistakes, about forgiveness." She looked at Margaret. "And about judgment." Margaret nodded. "Elizabeth told me how she's treated you over the years." "It's fine," I started. "No," Elizabeth cut in sharply. "It's not fine. I transferred my guilt onto you, Sadie. I saw in you everything I'd lost, that freedom to be genuine, to follow your heart without fear of judgment, and instead of admiring it, I tried to crush it." "The way people tried to crush us," Lawrence added quietly. "The way I helped crush you," Margaret said, surprising me. "After everything came out, I made sure everyone knew what horrible people you were. I wanted you to suffer like I had suffered." Elizabeth reached for her hand. "We deserved it." "No," Margaret shook her head. "No one deserves to be destroyed by their mistakes. I see that now." She turned to me. "Which is why we wanted to talk to you." Richard cleared his throat. "We've all been part of a cycle of judgment and revenge. It needs to stop." "What are you saying?" I asked. "I'm saying," Elizabeth stood, approaching me, "that I want to make things right. Really right. Not just with an apology, but with actions." She pulled out a folder from her desk. "I've been working on something, a children's book about forgiveness and second chances, about a little girl who learns that the scary witch next door is just a lonely woman with a sad story." I stared at her. "You're writing a children's book?" "Well," she smiled sheepishly, "I was hoping you might help me write it. Maybe collaborate?" The room spun slightly. "You want to write a book with me?" "Who better?" Lawrence chuckled. "You understand both sides of this story better than anyone. Plus," Margaret added, "it might help other families avoid 40 years of pain and misunderstanding." I looked at the folder, then at Elizabeth. "You're serious about this?" "Completely." She took my hands in hers. "Sadie, you came here wanting revenge, but you gave me something far more valuable, the courage to be honest, to face my past, to stop hiding behind perfection." Tears welled in my eyes. "I didn't expect this." "None of us did," Richard said warmly. "But sometimes the unexpected is exactly what we need." A knock at the door interrupted us. Cole poked his head in. "Everything okay in here?" "More than okay," I said, wiping my eyes. "Your mother just asked me to collaborate on a children's book with her." His jaw dropped. "Mom, you're writing a book?" "Well," Elizabeth laughed, "I thought it was time to try something new, something real." Margaret raised her glass. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," we echoed. As we rejoined the party outside, the evening had taken on an almost magical quality. The garden lights twinkled, and the tension that had characterized so many family gatherings had dissolved into genuine warmth. I watched as Elizabeth moved through the crowd, stopping to have real conversations instead of making polite small talk. She hugged people she'd previously only nodded to, laughed openly at jokes she would have once found inappropriate. "You know what's amazing?" Cole said, sliding his arm around my waist. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm seeing my actual mother, not just the role she's been playing." "It's beautiful," I whispered. Across the garden, Elizabeth was showing her manuscript to Ava, gesturing animatedly as she described her idea. Ava caught my eye and gave me a thumbs up. Madison appeared with fresh champagne. "So, a children's book about forgiveness, huh? That's quite a plot twist." "Life's full of them," I said, watching as Lawrence and Richard shared a laugh by the buffet table, decades of potential awkwardness dissolved by honest conversation. "You did this," Cole said softly. "You broke the cycle." I shook my head. "We all did. Sometimes it takes a whole family to heal a wound." As if hearing us, Elizabeth looked up and smiled. Not her society smile, not her perfect hostess smile, but the smile of a woman who had finally laid down her armor and found herself stronger without it. The revenge I'd planned had transformed into something far more powerful: redemption. Not just for Elizabeth, but for all of us who had been caught in the web of old secrets and unspoken pain. Sometimes the best endings aren't about getting even, they're about getting honest. The final guests were leaving as dawn's first light touched the horizon. Elizabeth and I sat on the terrace steps, sharing the last bottle of champagne, watching as Lawrence helped Margaret into her car. "They're going to have coffee tomorrow," Elizabeth said softly. "Start working through things properly." "Are you okay with that?" She smiled, touching the manuscript in her lap. "You know, for the first time in decades, I actually am. Some loves aren't meant to last forever. They're meant to teach us something." "And what did you learn?" "That perfection is the enemy of happiness." She turned to face me. "Sadie, when you first married Cole, I saw this vibrant, authentic young woman who refused to fit into the mold I'd created for our family. It terrified me. Because I reminded you of yourself before everything happened. Because you were everything I'd forced myself to stop being." She traced the edge of her glass. "Watching you stand up to me, refuse to be diminished. It was like looking into a mirror of my younger self. The self I betrayed." Cole appeared in the doorway. "Mom, Dad's looking for you. Something about breakfast plans with the out-of-town relatives." "Just a moment," Elizabeth called back. She pulled an old photograph from between the pages of her manuscript and handed it to me. It showed a young woman in a sundress, laughing at something off camera, her whole face alive with joy. "Is this me? The summer everything changed." Elizabeth's voice was soft. "I want you to have it." "Why?" "Because you gave me back that girl. Not through revenge, but through refusing to let me hide behind my perfect facade." She squeezed my hand. "The book we're going to write? It's not just about forgiveness. It's about remembering who we really are." "Elizabeth, call me Mom," she said suddenly. "If you want to, that is." Tears sprang to my eyes. "I'd like that," Richard's voice carried from inside. "Lizzie, the breakfast arrangements?" "Coming, dear?" She stood, straightening her dress. "Oh, and Sadie, those monthly slumber parties of yours?" I tensed slightly, remembering how this had all started. "Next time, I'd like to bring the wine, if I'm invited." A laugh bubbled up from my chest. "Really? Well, someone needs to teach your friends about proper vintages." Her eyes twinkled. "Besides, I have 40 years of real stories to share." As she walked inside, Cole took her place beside me. "Did my mother just invite herself to your slumber party?" "Apparently." I showed him the photograph. "She gave me this." He studied it, smiling. "I've never seen her look so free. Maybe we'll see it more often now." Inside, we could hear Elizabeth laughing with Richard about something. The sound was unrestrained, genuine, the laugh of a woman who had finally put down the weight of perfection. Madison and Ava joined us on the steps, looking sleepy but content. "So," Ava yawned, "mission accomplished?" I thought about my original plan for revenge, how I'd wanted to expose Elizabeth's past to hurt her the way she'd hurt me. Instead, we'd all found something more valuable: truth, understanding, and the courage to be imperfect. "Not exactly," I said. "Something better happened." "Yeah." Madison nodded toward the house, where Elizabeth was now animatedly describing our book idea to Richard. "We got our aunt back, the real one." The sun rose higher, painting the garden in soft morning light. Lawrence's car was long gone, Margaret's too. The letters that had started all this lay forgotten in Elizabeth's desk drawer. Their power to hurt finally faded. "You know what this means, right?" Cole grinned. "Family dinners are going to be a lot more interesting from now on." "Good," I said, leaning against him. "I like interesting." Elizabeth appeared in the doorway again. "Sadie, I've been thinking about the book. What if our witch character isn't really a witch at all? What if she's just someone who built walls to protect herself from getting hurt?" I smiled, recognizing the metaphor. "I think that's perfect." "Perfect?" She laughed. "Oh no, dear, not perfect. Real. That's so much better." As the morning light filled the garden, I watched Elizabeth, my mother-in-law, my former nemesis, my future co-author, begin to sketch out ideas for our story. Her face was animated, her guard completely down, showing the woman she'd always been beneath the carefully constructed facade. Sometimes revenge doesn't look anything like what we planned. Sometimes it looks like healing, like truth, like second chances. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, it looks like a fresh start for everyone involved. I picked up my glass, raising it one final time. "To being real?" "To being real," they all echoed, as the new day dawned bright and full of possibility.
The text message from Christine lit up my phone screen. Emergency family meeting. Tonight, 7 p.m. Don't you dare say no. I stared at those words, my stomach already knotting. Being the successful one in the family meant every emergency meeting inevitably led to the same thing. Someone needed money. Again. My name is Zara, and I've spent the last decade being my family's personal ATM. While they see a thriving businesswoman who has it easy, they don't see the 80-hour weeks or the sacrifices I've made to build my consulting firm from scratch. You're not seriously going, are you? Sierra asked, watching me gather my things from across our shared office space. That's the third emergency this month. What choice do I have? I sighed, slipping on my blazer. Last time I missed one, Dad didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. Maybe that wasn't such a bad thing, she muttered, but I pretended not to hear. I arrived at Christine's house at 7:05 p.m. Everyone was already there, scattered around her living room like vultures waiting to feast. Theo sprawled on the couch, probably hiding another betting slip in his pocket. Adeline sat cross-legged on the floor, perfectly manicured nails tapping away at her phone. Dad occupied his usual armchair, looking stern as ever. "Finally!" Christine exclaimed. "We've been waiting." "Some of us have to work," I replied, choosing to stand rather than sit. "What's the emergency?" "We're planning a family reunion," Adeline piped up, finally looking up from her phone. "Everyone's coming. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even Great-Aunt Martha." I waited for the other shoe to drop. "We need you to fund it," Christine said, as if announcing the weather. "The venue alone is $5,000, and then there's catering, decorations." "No." The word left my mouth before I could stop it. The room fell silent. 5 pairs of eyes stared at me in disbelief. "What do you mean, no?" Theo sat up straight. "It's for family." "I mean no," I repeated, stronger this time. "I'm done being the family bank." Christine's face reddened. "After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I laughed, but there was no humour in it. "Like what, Christine? Like borrowing 10 grand for your business venture that never happened? Or you, Theo, the gambling debt I covered last Christmas?" "That's different," Theo protested. "I was in trouble." "You're always in trouble," my voice rose. "All of you, always needing something, always taking, never giving back. I'm tired of it." "Zara," Dad's voice carried that familiar note of disapproval. "This is about family unity. Your mother would have wanted—" "Don't." I held up my hand. "Don't you dare use Mom to manipulate me. She would have wanted you all to stand on your own 2 feet. "You've changed," Adeline said quietly. "Success has made you selfish." That word, selfish, hit me like a slap. I'd heard it so many times over the years whenever I dared to say no, whenever I tried to set boundaries. "You want to talk about selfish?" I grabbed my purse. "Look in the mirror, all of you, I'm done." "If you walk out that door," Christine called after me, "don't expect us to be there when you need us." I paused at the doorway, turning back one last time. When have you ever been there when I needed you? The door slammed behind me with a satisfying bang. In my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I felt something shift inside me. Years of resentment crystallized into determination. My phone buzzed continuously, messages from all of them, ranging from guilt trips to outright threats. I switched it off. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and called Sierra. "How bad was it?" she asked. "I finally did it," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. "I said no." "About damn time," she paused. "Are you okay?" "No," I admitted, "but I will be. They need to learn they can't keep using me like this. They need to learn about consequences." "What are you going to do?" I took a long sip of wine, an idea forming in my mind. "I'm going to teach them a lesson they'll never forget, something that will either make them or break them." "Zara." Sierra's voice held a note of warning. "Don't worry," I said, already opening my laptop. "This isn't about revenge. It's about growth. They just don't know it yet." As I began typing, I felt lighter than I had in years. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling them. And if my plan worked, My family would thank me for it someday, or hate me forever. Either way, I was done being their safety net. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room buzzed overhead as I tried to make sense of what had happened. 1 minute I was presenting to clients, the next I was doubled over, unable to breathe. Now here I was, hooked up to monitors, watching my blood pressure numbers dance across the screen. "Ms. Whitney?" A doctor in blue scrubs approached my bed. "I'm Dr. Reynolds. Your test results show you've experienced a severe panic attack, complicated by exhaustion and dangerously high stress levels." I almost laughed. "Stress? I can't be here for stress. I have meetings tomorrow, deadlines." "You're not going anywhere," he interrupted firmly. "Your body is sending you a clear message. Ignore it, and next time could be much worse." A nurse appeared with admission papers. "We're keeping you for observation, at least 48 hours. My phone lit up again. Another message from Christine. I'd been ignoring them all week, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hope you're proud of yourself. Dad's devastated. The reunion's cancelled. Thanks to you." The monitor beeped as my heart rate spiked. "I'll take that," the nurse said, plucking the phone from my hands. "Doctor's orders, no stress triggers." Later that evening, Sierra arrived with an overnight bag and my laptop. "Don't even think about working," she warned, seeing my eyes light up at the sight of my computer. "But I thought you might want to handle some personal matters." "Like what?" She sat on the edge of my bed, her expression serious. "Like your will, Zara. This is a wake-up call. What if it had been something worse?" I started to protest, but the words died in my throat. She was right. If something happened to me, my family would tear each other apart over my assets. "I need a lawyer," I said finally. "Already called Barrett," Sierra replied. "He's on his way." Barrett arrived an hour later, leather briefcase in hand. As Emery's brother and a family friend, he knew exactly what I was dealing with. "Interesting timing," he said, pulling up a chair. "Emery told me about the reunion drama." "Then you understand why this needs to be done carefully," I replied. "I want to help them, Barrett, but not in the way they expect." He opened his briefcase. "I'm listening." For the next 2 hours, we crafted something that was part will, part intervention. Each family member would receive a letter leading them to a specific charity or organization that mirrored their personal struggles. "Christine needs to understand what real need looks like," I explained, watching Barrett take notes. "Send her to the women's shelter downtown. Theo should work with gambling addiction support groups. Adeline." I paused. "Youth self-esteem programs. She needs to see beyond appearances." "And the inheritance?" Barrett asked. "They'll get it, but only after 6 months of documented volunteer work with their assigned organizations. No shortcuts, no buying their way out." Barrett whistled low. "They're going to be furious." "Good," I said, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Maybe fury will motivate them to change. "What about your father?" I closed my eyes briefly. "The Veterans Center. He needs to remember what real sacrifice looks like." As Barrett drafted the documents, Sierra squeezed my hand. "Are you sure about this?" "For the first time in years, yes." I opened my eyes, looking at the hospital ceiling. They need this. I need this. "There's one more thing," Barrett said, looking up from his paperwork. "To make this legally binding, we need to inform them while you're still in the hospital. It adds weight to the situation." "You want me to tell them now?" He nodded. "I'll call them in tomorrow. Let them think it's worse than it is. Sometimes people need a shock to wake them up." The thought of facing them made my chest tight, but the monitor's steady beeping reminded me why I was here in the first place. "Do it," I said. "Call them all in. It's time they understood what they've done to me." After they left, I lay in the darkness, listening to the quiet hum of hospital machinery. My phone sat silent in the drawer, but I could imagine the messages piling up, the missed calls, the family group chat exploding with drama. For the first time since Mom died, I felt like I was taking control back. Maybe it was the medication, maybe it was the exhaustion, but I smiled as I drifted off to sleep. Tomorrow everything would change. They'd either hate me for it or thank me later, but either way, I was done being their crutch. Sometimes the biggest act of love is forcing people to stand on their own. The thought followed me into my dreams, where for once I wasn't running to anyone's rescue. I was simply standing still, watching them learn to save themselves. They filed into my hospital room like mourners at a funeral, faces drawn with worry and barely concealed expectation. Christine clutched her designer handbag like a shield. Theo couldn't stop fidgeting. Adeline kept glancing at her reflection in the window. Dad took the chair closest to my bed, trying to look concerned rather than calculating. Barrett stood by the window, briefcase ready. Sierra positioned herself near the door, arms crossed, watching. "Oh, sweetie," Christine started, her voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. "Why didn't you tell us you were so ill?" "Because I'm not," I replied flatly. "I'm here because of stress, because of you, all of you." The room fell silent. "What's he doing here?" Theo asked, jerking his chin toward Barrett. "I've asked Barrett to help me revise my will," I said, watching their expressions shift. "Recent events have made me realize some changes are necessary." Christine straightened up immediately. "Of course, you need to protect your assets. I completely understand. Let me finish," I cut her off. "Barrett, the letters, please." He opened his briefcase and distributed 4 sealed envelopes. My family stared at them like they might explode. "Open them," I instructed. The sound of tearing paper filled the room. I watched their faces transform as they read: confusion, shock, anger, disbelief. "This is a joke, right?" Adeline was the first to speak. "You want me to work at some youth centre? For 6 months? A gambling addiction centre?" Theo crumpled his letter. "Have you lost your mind?" Christine's face had gone pale. "A women's shelter? I don't. You can and you will," I said firmly. "If you want any part of my estate, these are my terms. 6 months of documented volunteer work at your assigned organisations. No exceptions, no buying your way out." "This is ridiculous," Dad exploded, waving his letter. "The Veterans Centre? I served my country." "Exactly," I interrupted. "So, you should have no problem serving again, this time by helping others who've sacrificed everything." "And if we refuse," Christine demanded, "then you get nothing." I kept my voice steady. "My entire estate will go to these organisations instead." "You can't do this." Theo stood up, pacing. "It's not legal." "Actually," Barrett stepped forward, "it's completely legal. I've drawn up all the necessary documentation. Zara's conditions are clear and binding." "This is revenge," Adeline accused, tears smearing her perfect makeup. "For the reunion thing." "No," I said softly. "This is an intervention. Look at yourselves. Really look. Christine, when's the last time you earned your own money? Theo, how many times have I bailed you out? Adeline, do you even know who you are beneath all that superficial perfection? And me?" Dad's voice was dangerous and low. "What's my great sin?" "Enabling them," I replied, "teaching them that taking from others is easier than standing on their own feet." "You're our sister," Christine pleaded. "Our daughter. Family helps family." "I'm not helping by being your human ATM." I gestured at the hospital room. "Look where it's gotten me. This stops now." Sierra stepped forward. "I think Zara needs to rest. You all have your letters. The choice is yours." "Choice?" Theo laughed bitterly. "This is blackmail." "No," I corrected him. "This is tough love. Something I should have done years ago." They left one by one, Dad last of all. He paused at the door, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Your mother would be ashamed," he said quietly. "No, Dad," I replied, feeling tears prick my eyes. "Mum would have done this years ago. She was stronger than any of us." After they left, Sierra sat on the edge of my bed. Well, that went about as well as expected. Barrett gathered his papers. "They'll come around. Or they won't. Either way, you've done the right thing." "Have I?" I whispered, suddenly uncertain. "You should have seen their faces." "I did," Sierra squeezed my hand, and beneath all that anger I saw something else. Fear. because for the first time, they're facing consequences. My phone buzzed. A message from Emery. Barrett told me what you did. About time someone shook them up. I'm here if you need me. I smiled slightly, remembering why Emery was the only family member who didn't get a letter. He'd built his business from scratch, never asking for handouts. Get some rest, Sierra ordered. The hard part's over. But as I lay there watching the sun set through my hospital window, I knew she was wrong. The hard part was just beginning. For all of us. 2 weeks after my hospital release, Sierra drove me to the women's shelter where Christine was supposed to be volunteering. We sat in the car watching the entrance. She won't show, I said, checking my watch. $10 says you're wrong, Sierra replied, pointing at a familiar figure hurrying up the street. Christine looked different. No designer bag, no expensive jewellery. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a plain sweater. She hesitated at the entrance, then squared her shoulders and went inside. Well, I'll be damned, I muttered. 1 down, 3 to go, Sierra said, starting the car. Where to next? The gambling addiction centre was across town. We found Theo outside smoking a cigarette, deep in conversation with an older man. As we watched, the man broke down crying. Theo awkwardly patted his shoulder, then pulled out his phone and appeared to be showing him something. That's Marcus, a voice said behind us. We turned to see the centre's director. Your brother's been helping him set up a budgeting app. Seems Theo has quite a knack for connecting with our members. Takes one to know one, I suppose. My throat tightened. He's actually showing up regularly? 3 times a week like clockwork. Even started attending the sessions himself. The youth centre was next. Through the window we spotted Adeline sitting in a circle with teenage girls. Her face was bare of makeup, and she was gesturing animatedly as she spoke. One of the girls wiped away tears while nodding. What's she saying? I wondered aloud. A staff member passing by overheard me, sharing her story about social media addiction and body image issues. The girls really relate to her. She's organising a real beauty workshop for next week. Adeline, my sister Adeline, the woman nodded. She's been a revelation. Says she's finally finding purpose beyond her Instagram followers. Last stop was the Veterans Centre. My stomach churned as we pulled into the parking lot. Dad's car was there, but so were several others I recognised from family gatherings. Inside, we found Dad in the recreation room, playing chess with an elderly veteran. Uncle Rob was helping with physical therapy, and Aunt Jane was organising care packages. Your father's been talking up the centre to everyone he knows, the coordinator told me. He's recruited half his golf club as volunteers. Says it reminds him of the camaraderie he felt in service. I don't understand, I said to Sierra as we left. They're actually doing it. All of them. Maybe they needed a push, she suggested. Or maybe they needed purpose more than they needed money. That evening, my phone lit up with a message from Christine. Met a woman today. 3 kids escaping abuse. Reminded me of Mom before she met Dad. Never realised how lucky we were. Then Theo. Helped a guy today. He lost everything to betting, just like I almost did. Feels good to be on the other side. Adeline sent a selfie, her face natural, surrounded by smiling teenage girls. They think I'm inspiring them, but it's the other way around. Dad's message was last and shortest. Your mother would be proud of all of us. I sat on my couch reading and rereading the messages. Sierra brought me a glass of wine. Having second thoughts about your revenge plan? She asked. It wasn't about revenge, I protested. Not really. No, she raised an eyebrow. Okay, maybe a little, I admitted. But I never expected this. My phone buzzed again. A message from Barrett. Emery and I dropped by the Veterans Centre today. Your dad introduced us to everyone as my daughter's family. First time he's acknowledged me as anything but his lawyer. You know what the funny thing is? I said to Sierra. I thought I was teaching them a lesson about money, about not depending on me, but they're learning something else entirely. They're learning who they are without the safety net, Sierra nodded, without the roles they've been playing their whole lives. The entitled sister, the gambling brother, the vain sister, the demanding father. I took a sip of wine. Maybe those were just masks they got stuck behind. And what about you? Sierra asked. What mask are you taking off? I thought about it. The savior, the ATM, the one who always has to fix everything. And how does it feel? I smiled, remembering Christine's message, Theo's determination, Adeline's bare face, Dad's simple words. It feels like freedom, I said. For all of us. Sierra raised her glass. To freedom, then. And to karma, which turns out to be a better teacher than any of us could have planned. We clinked glasses, and I felt the last knot of tension in my chest finally begin to unwind. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's giving people the chance to surprise themselves. The family meeting wasn't my idea. Christine called it. 1 month into their volunteer work. This time we met at my house. Neutral territory. They arrived together and I barely recognized them. Christine's designer clothes had been replaced with practical wear. Theo's nervous energy had calmed, and Adeline's face showed actual laugh lines instead of Botox. We need to talk, Christine said as they settled into my living room, about what you did to us. I braced myself. Okay, talk. You manipulated us, Theo started. Used your money to force us into this. You're right, I admitted. I did. You had no right, Adeline added, but her voice lacked its usual bite. Maybe not, I agreed. But tell me honestly, would you have done any of this otherwise? Silence filled the room. I met a woman today, Christine said suddenly. She reminded me of me, constantly asking her sister for money, making excuses, playing victim. I watched her and felt ashamed. At least you didn't gamble away your kid's college fund, Theo muttered. Had to talk down a guy today who did exactly that. Kept thinking about all the times I promised to stop betting, all the times you bailed me out. My girls, Adeline said softly. She'd started calling the teenagers at the centre her girls. They showed me their Instagram accounts today, all the filters, the editing. I saw myself in every single one of them. That desperate need to be perfect. Dad cleared his throat. The men at the centre. Some of them lost everything. Family, homes, dignity. And here I was, treating my own daughter like a bank. I didn't do this to punish you, I said, feeling tears prick my eyes. I did it because we were all drowning. Me trying to save everyone. You expecting to be saved. You could have just talked to us, Christine protested. Would you have listened? I asked. Or would you have called me selfish again, manipulated me with guilt until I gave in, like you always did? More silence. I hate what you did, Theo said finally, but I needed it. We all did. The funny thing is, Adeline added, I don't even care about the inheritance anymore. These kids, they need me. Really need me. Not my money, not my connections, just me. That's what Mum always tried to teach us, Dad said quietly. Service to others. Remember how she volunteered everywhere? We used to think she was wasting her time. She was the strong one, I said. I just copied her playbook. Christine stood up suddenly. I'm angry at you, Zara. For the manipulation, for the ultimatum. But I'm also grateful. And I don't know how to feel about that. Welcome to personal growth, I replied. It's messy. The shelter needs help renovating their children's playroom, Christine said after a moment. I was thinking, maybe we could all pitch in. As a family. My girls could paint a mural, Adeline offered. They're amazing artists. Some of the guys from the centre are good with construction, Dad added. I could ask them to supervise. I can handle the budget, Theo said. Make sure we get the most value for our money. I sat back, watching them plan, their excitement building. Sierra's words echoed in my mind. Maybe they needed purpose more than they needed money. One condition, I said, interrupting their planning. Whatever we do it together. No more divisions, no more keeping score. Does this mean you're speaking to us again? Adeline asked hopefully. I never stopped speaking to you, I corrected. I just stopped enabling you. There's a difference. Dad stood up, walking to where I sat. His eyes were wet. I failed you as a father. Failed all of you, really. Got so caught up in what we were entitled to, I forgot what we were capable of. We all failed each other, I said, standing to hug him. But we're fixing it now. One by one, they joined the hug until we were all tangled together, laughing and crying at the same time. So, Christine said as we finally broke apart, about that playroom renovation. I'll call Barrett, I offered. He can help with any permits we need. And Emery, Adeline added. He's good at organising projects. As they left that evening, making plans and assigning tasks, I felt something shift in the air. The old dynamics of resentment and dependency were being replaced by something new, something healthier. My phone buzzed with a message from Sierra. How did it go? I typed back. They're still mad, but they're also grateful. And maybe that's exactly where we need to be right now. Because sometimes the best families are the ones that break apart and rebuild themselves, stronger than before. The women's shelter playroom transformation was in full swing when I arrived that Saturday morning. Paint cans, drop cloths, and tools cluttered the space, but what caught my attention was my family, actually working together. Adeline stood on a ladder, directing her teenage artists as they sketched a forest scene across one wall. Their design incorporated inspiring words hidden among the trees: strength, hope, dream. Look who finally showed up, Christine called out, roller in hand. We started without you. Someone had to bring coffee, I said, holding up the carrier of drinks. Where's Theo? Outside with Dad and the veterans building the storage units, she replied. They're like a well-oiled machine out there. I headed to the courtyard, where Dad was showing two teenagers how to measure wood properly while Theo calculated materials with a contractor. No, see, if we adjust this design slightly, Theo was saying, we can save 20% on materials without compromising quality. The contractor nodded approvingly. You've got a good head for this, son. Dad spotted me and waved. Perfect timing. We need another set of hands. For the next few hours, I moved between groups, painting, building, and watching my family in their element. Christine organised donations of toys and books, handling everything with the same efficiency she once applied to shopping sprees. Maria's coming in today, she told me during a water break. The woman I mentioned? With 3 kids. The one who reminded you of Mum, she nodded. We found her a job, administrative work at a law firm. She starts Monday. You did that? We did that, she corrected. The shelter staff and I. Turns out my networking skills are good for something besides finding the next designer sale. Inside, Adeline was sitting with her girls during their break, showing them something on her phone. That's me at your age, she said. All those filters, all that makeup. I thought it made me special. Now I look at it and don't even recognize myself. But you're so pretty without all that stuff, one girl said. Adeline's smile was genuine. Took me 30 years and a very stubborn sister to figure that out. By late afternoon, the playroom had transformed. Bright murals covered the walls, new storage units lined up neatly, and donated toys filled fresh-painted shelves. Dad and his veteran friends had even installed a reading nook with cushions. This is incredible, the shelter director said, wiping tears. The children, they've never had anything like this. We're not done yet, Theo announced. The guys from my support group, they're organising a fundraiser, gaming tournament, all proceeds to the shelter. And my girls want to start a weekly art therapy session, Adeline added. The veterans offered to do security upgrades, Dad said. Free of charge. I stood back, watching them plan and organise, no one asking me for money or solutions. Sierra appeared beside me, camera in hand. She'd been documenting the day. Still think this was about revenge? She asked quietly. Before I could answer, a commotion at the door drew our attention. Maria, the woman Christine had mentioned, stood there with her children, their eyes wide at the transformed space. Welcome home, Christine said warmly, leading them in. The youngest child, a girl about 6, ran straight to the reading nook. Mommy, look, books! Maria burst into tears. Christine hugged her while Adeline entertained the other children, showing them the mural's hidden words. Theo and Dad started explaining the new storage systems, designed specifically for families starting over. No, I finally answered Sierra. This was never about revenge, this was about breaking patterns. Look at them, really look. Christine, once so focused on appearances, comforting a woman in worn clothes and unwashed hair. Theo, who gambled away thousands, now proudly showing off budget-conscious designs. Adeline, teaching young girls to see their natural beauty. Dad, serving others instead of demanding service. "Your mum would have loved this," Sierra said, snapping another photo. "She did love this," I replied. "She tried to show us all along. We just weren't ready to see it." My phone buzzed. A message from Barrett. "Permits came through for the shelter's kitchen renovation. Ready when you are." I looked at my family, all engaged in their tasks, all finding their own ways to help. No one had asked me to fund the kitchen renovation. No one had demanded I fix everything. "Tell them we'll start planning next week," I typed back. "The whole family wants to help." Because that's what we'd become. Finally, truly, a family. Not bound by obligation or money, but by the simple act of helping others, and in doing so, helping ourselves. "Hey, Zara," Adeline called out. "Stop standing around and come help us organize these art supplies." I smiled and joined them, just one more pair of hands in a room full of people learning to give instead of take. The 6-month mark arrived faster than any of us expected. Barrett called a meeting at his office to discuss the completion of their volunteer requirements, but my family had other plans. "We want to meet at the shelter instead," Christine informed me. "There's something you need to see." I arrived to find not just my immediate family, but a crowd of familiar and new faces. Maria and her children, the teenage artists, veterans from Dad's Centre, people from Theo's support group, all mingling in the shelter's newly renovated community room. "Surprise!" Adeline called out, pulling me inside. "We're celebrating." "Celebrating what?" I asked, taking in the decorations and food spread. 6 months of transformation, Christine said, appearing with a folder. "And we have something to show you." She opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. "These are the shelter's statistics since we started volunteering. Successful job placements up 40%, housing placements up 50%. Theo stepped forward with his own documentation. 12 of my group members have been gambling free for 3 months or more. We've started a financial literacy program. My girls, Adeline beamed, gesturing to the teenagers who are now setting up an art display, are all passing their classes. 3 got college acceptance letters last week. Dad cleared his throat. The Veterans Centre has doubled its volunteer base. We're opening a new wing next month. What are you all saying? I asked, though I already knew. We're saying we're not stopping, Christine declared. Papers or no papers, inheritance or no inheritance, we're committed now. You can't make us quit, Theo added with a grin. We're officially addicted to helping people. Speaking of addiction, a man stepped forward, one of Theo's group members. Your brother saved my life. Literally. I was contemplating suicide when he talked me down, showed me there was hope. Maria hugged Christine. I start my management training next week. My kids are in school, we have our own apartment, and it's all because she believed in me. One of Adeline's teens spoke up. I haven't used a filter on my photos in 2 months. I like my real face now. A veteran patted Dad's shoulder. This guy reminded us we still have value. We're not forgotten soldiers anymore. I felt tears welling up as more people stepped forward, each with a story about how my family had impacted their lives. But here's the real kicker, Christine said, pulling out one final document. We've started a foundation. All of us together. The paperwork just came through. A foundation? I whispered. The Whitney Family Foundation for Community Empowerment, Theo announced proudly. We're pooling our resources, not just money, but skills, connections, time. And guess what? Adeline added. We've already received our first major donation. From Emery's company. Barrett stepped forward, more papers in hand. So, about that inheritance. Keep it, Christine interrupted. All of it. Add it to the foundation's funds. Are you sure? I asked, looking at each of them. That's a lot of money. Money we didn't earn, Dad said firmly. Money we don't need anymore. We've found something better. Besides, Theo laughed, we're all making our own money now. Christine's starting a job placement program. I'm consulting for financial literacy projects. Adeline's got her youth mentoring certification. And I'm teaching veterans how to start small businesses, Dad finished. Turns out retirement was boring anyway. Sierra, who had been quietly filming everything, spoke up. So, Zara, still think your hospital bed scheme was too harsh? I looked around the room, at my family, at the lives they'd touched, at the community they'd built. I thought I was teaching them a lesson about money. They taught me one about purpose instead. You gave us a gift, Christine said, hugging me. A kick in the pants we desperately needed. The best kind of revenge, Theo added, is watching people become better than you ever imagined they could be. Even if we hated you a little bit at first, Adeline admitted. A lot at first, Dad corrected, pulling me into a bear hug. But that's what good parents do, isn't it? Push their children to be better. You did for us what your mother would have done. The celebration continued around us, people sharing stories, making plans, building connections. My family moved through the crowd with confidence and purpose, no longer seeking validation through money or status. So, Barrett said quietly, holding up the inheritance papers, what should I do with these? I watched Christine comforting a new shelter resident, Theo mentoring a young man about budgeting, Adeline leading an impromptu self-esteem workshop, and Dad sharing war stories with his veterans. Shred them, I said. They don't need my money anymore. They've found their own wealth. The autumn breeze carried the sound of laughter from the shelter's courtyard, where Dad and his veterans were setting up tables for the Foundation's first official fundraising gala. Christine darted around with her clipboard, directing caterers and volunteers with the same intensity she once reserved for shopping sprees. The mayor's confirmed, she announced, pausing beside me, and 3 city council members. Remember when you used to get this excited about sample sales? I teased. She rolled her eyes. Don't remind me. Maria's handling the guest list, by the way. She's amazing at organisation. Speaking of amazing, Theo called out, jogging over with his phone, the online donations just hit 6 figures. The gaming tournament was a huge success. Inside, Adeline and her girls were putting final touches on an art installation, photographs and stories of lives transformed through the Foundation's work. No filters, no pretense, just raw humanity. Look who clean up nice, Sierra said, filming as the teens emerged from the shelter's new career closet in professional attire. They'd be serving as hosts tonight, sharing their stories with potential donors. My daughter got her first job interview tomorrow, Maria told me proudly, adjusting one girl's blazer. Christine's been coaching her. The shelter director pulled me aside, tears in her eyes. When your family first started volunteering, I thought it was just rich people doing community service for show. I've never been happier to be wrong. Dad appeared, looking dapper in his suit. The veterans brought extra chairs, though I think they're really here for the food. Better than military rations, one of them shouted, making everyone laugh. Barrett and Emery arrived early, carrying boxes of promotional materials for the Foundation. Wait until you see the video Sierra edited, Barrett said. There won't be a dry eye in the house. As evening fell and guests began arriving, I watched my family work the room. Christine introduced Maria to potential employers, her networking skills now serving a greater purpose. Theo shared success stories from his financial literacy program, while Adeline's teens proudly showed off their art and achievements. Dad stood with his veterans explaining their business mentorship program to impressed investors. These men and women sacrificed everything for our country, he said. The least we can do is help them rebuild their lives. Quite a change from the family that used to beg you for money, Sierra observed, capturing everything on camera. Before I could respond, the mayor stepped up to the microphone. I've seen many community initiatives in my career, but the Whitney Family Foundation is unique. It's not just about throwing money at problems. It's about personal investment, about transformation from within. Christine took the stage next. 6 months ago, my sister Zara taught us a hard lesson about privilege and responsibility. She forced us to confront our own failures and find purpose beyond wealth. Tonight, we're not asking for handouts. We're offering partnership in changing lives. Theo followed with statistics about their impact. Jobs created, homes secured, addictions overcome. Adeline's girls shared their journeys from insecurity to confidence. Dad introduced veterans who'd started successful businesses. None of this would have happened, Christine concluded, if our sister hadn't had the courage to push us off our pedestals. We thought she was punishing us. Instead, she gave us the greatest gift possible, the chance to become better people. The applause was thunderous, donations poured in. But what moved me most was watching my family throughout the evening. Christine mentoring Maria's daughter, Theo counseling a young man about gambling temptation, Adeline encouraging a shy teen to share her artwork, Dad proudly introducing his veterans to business contacts. As the event wound down, we gathered in the playroom we'd renovated together, the place where our transformation had really begun. Remember when we thought this was just about inheritance? Theo laughed. Remember when we hated Zara for manipulating us? Adeline added. Remember when we thought money was the only way to measure success? Christine mused. Dad pulled me into a hug. Remember when I said your mother would be ashamed? I was wrong. She's probably up there right now saying, I told you so. Sierra lowered her camera. So was it worth it? The hospital stay, the tough love, the risk of losing your family? I looked around the room, at Christine and Maria planning their next job fair, at Theo teaching budgeting to shelter residents, at Adeline removing the last traces of her Instagram influencer life, at Dad finally being the leader he was meant to be. I didn't lose my family, I said. I found them. We all did. Because sometimes the greatest act of love isn't giving people what they want, it's giving them what they need to become who they're meant to be. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge is watching that transformation unfold, one changed life at a time.
The text message from my mother-in-law made my stomach drop. Family emergency meeting, tonight, 7 p.m. sharp, attendance mandatory. 10 years of marriage to Wyatt, and Kylie's messages still had the power to make me feel like that scared 22-year-old girl who first walked into their mansion. I'm Aliyah, and this is the story of how I went from being the family's supposed gold digger to becoming their unexpected salvation. You don't have to go, Wyatt said, loosening his tie as he walked into our bedroom. My mother's being dramatic again. I set my phone down and met his concerned gaze. When isn't she? But this time feels different. Different how? Just a feeling. I smoothed my blazer, checking my reflection. The young woman who'd once trembled before the mighty Bryants was gone. In her place stood someone else entirely, someone they had no idea existed. Remember our first dinner with them? Wyatt asked, wrapping his arms around my waist. How could I forget? Your mother took one look at my second-hand dress and decided I was after your trust fund. I turned to face him. That prenup was quite the wedding gift. I'm still sorry about that. Don't be. It was the best motivation I've ever received. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Christian. You ready for tonight, boss lady? I smiled, typing back, as ready as I'll ever be. What's Christian saying? Wyatt asked, trying to peek at my screen. I locked my phone quickly. Just checking in. You know how he worries. The drive to his parents' house was tense. Each mile brought back memories. Kylie's snide comments about my background, Luke's condescending financial advice, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. They're going to love what you've done with the charity foundation, Wyatt said, squeezing my hand as we pulled up to the gates. If only he knew. Elisa's car was already parked in the circular driveway. She stood by the entrance, pacing and biting her nails. A habit from childhood that only emerged when something was seriously wrong. Thank God you're here, she said, hurrying toward us. Mum's on a warpath. What's going on? Wyatt asked. I don't know exactly, but Dad's been locked in his study all day, and Mum keeps making these weird calls. We followed her inside. The mansion hadn't changed. Still the same oppressive grandeur, still the same portrait of Kylie in her debutante dress dominating the foyer. There you are. Kylie's voice cut through the air like a knife. She stood at the top of the stairs, perfectly coiffed as always. We've been waiting. Luke appeared behind her, his usual confident stance replaced by something more rigid, almost fearful. "What's this about, Mom?" Wyatt asked as we climbed the stairs. "Oh, you'll see." She turned her ice blue eyes on me. "We have quite a lot to discuss with your wife." The way she said wife, like it was something dirty, made my blood boil. But I kept my face neutral, years of practice serving me well. We filed into Luke's study. The room smelled of expensive cigars and aged leather, but something was different. The prized art pieces that usually lined the walls were missing. "Sit," Kylie commanded, pointing to the chairs arranged before Luke's desk. I took my seat, noting how Elisa chose to stand by the window instead of joining her mother's side. Interesting. "We know what you've been doing," Kylie said, placing a folder on the desk between us. "Did you really think you could get away with it?" "Get away with what exactly?" I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "The transfers, the shell companies, the offshore accounts." Luke spoke for the first time, his voice heavy. "We've tracked it all." Wyatt stood up. "What are you talking about?" "Your wife," Kylie spat, "has been systematically stealing from this family for years, and we have proof." I couldn't help it. I laughed. The sound seemed to startle everyone in the room. "Something funny about fraud, Aliyah?" Luke demanded. I reached for the folder, flipping it open with steady hands. Inside were transaction records, business filings, and investment reports. They had indeed been tracking something, just not what they thought. "You know," I said, closing the folder, "for people so concerned about their money, you really should have paid more attention to who's been buying up your company's debt." The color drained from Luke's face. "What is she talking about?" Wyatt asked, looking between his parents and me. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "I think it's time we had a different kind of family meeting, one where we discuss how I'm going to save your empire from collapse." The silence that followed was deafening, and for the first time in 10 years, I saw real fear in Kylie's eyes. "What do you mean, save our empire?" Kylie's perfectly manicured nails dug into the leather of Luke's desk chair. "We don't need saving, especially not from you." "The missing artwork suggests otherwise," I replied, gesturing to the bare walls. "Selling off assets already?" Luke slammed his hand on the desk. "How dare you—" "Dad," Elisa interrupted, stepping forward. "Is it true? Are we in trouble?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Wyatt moved closer to me, his expression a mix of confusion and dawning realization. "Aliyah, what's going on?" he asked quietly. I pulled out my phone and dialed Christian. "Send them in," I said, then ended the call. "Send who in?" Kylie demanded. "My team of financial advisors. They're waiting outside with detailed reports of your company's current position." I met Luke's gaze. "Including the 3 failed development projects you've been hiding from your board." Luke collapsed into his chair, suddenly looking every bit his 60 years. "How did you—" "No," I finished for him. "I've been watching your company for years. The Caribbean resort project that went belly up. The failed tech startup investments. The mounting debt you've been shuffling between subsidiaries." Wyatt's face hardened. "Dad, is this true?" Before Luke could answer, the study door opened. 3 people in suits entered, carrying tablets and folders. They silently distributed documents to everyone in the room. "Page 1 shows your current debt position," I explained, my voice steady. "Page 2 shows who holds that debt. Pay particular attention to the highlighted sections." The room fell silent as they read. I watched Kylie's face transform from contempt to horror as she processed the information. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Mom?" Elisa's voice cracked as she looked up from her papers. "We're nearly bankrupt?" "Not nearly," I corrected. "You would be, if not for the anonymous investor who's been buying up your debt for the past 3 years. Wyatt's head snapped up. "You?" I nodded. "Remember that prenup you made me sign? The one that specified I couldn't touch any family assets or claim any part of the family business?" I allowed myself a small smile. "Well, I followed those terms to the letter. I built something of my own instead. The charity foundation," Wyatt said slowly. "It wasn't just a charity, was it?" "The foundation was real enough. But it was just one branch of what I created. I turned to my team. Show them the Artemis Group portfolio. More documents were distributed. I watched as understanding dawned on their faces. 15 billion in assets, I stated clearly. Built from scratch over 10 years. No family money, no connections, just hard work and determination. The same determination you tried to break with your accusations and prenup. Impossible, Kylie repeated, but her voice was weaker now. The woman you dismissed as a gold digger now owns enough of your debt to force a takeover, I continued, but that's not what I want. Luke leaned forward. What do you want? Originally, revenge, to prove you wrong, to show you exactly who you underestimated. I sat down next to Wyatt, taking his hand. But now I want to help. Why would you help us? Kylie demanded, though her usual venom was missing. Because despite everything, I love your son, and because sometimes the best revenge is showing mercy when you could choose destruction. Elisa moved to stand beside me. I've seen the numbers, Mom. We need her help. This is a trick, Kylie insisted, but even she didn't seem to believe it anymore. No tricks, I said firmly. Just business. I have a proposal that will save your company, protect the jobs of thousands of employees, and restore the legacy you're so proud of. But it comes with conditions. What conditions? Luke asked. I stood up, straightening my blazer. First, you'll stop treating me like an outsider trying to steal your fortune. The irony of that should be clear by now. Wyatt squeezed my hand, and I drew strength from his touch. Second, we'll restructure the company leadership. No more hiding failures or cooking books. Everything transparent, everything above board. And third, Luke prompted. Third, I said, looking directly at Kylie. You'll apologize, not just to me, but to every person you've looked down on, every employee you've belittled, every family member you've manipulated. It's time for things to change. The room fell silent again, broken only by the sound of Kylie's shuddering breath. Take the night to think about it, I said, gathering my things. My team will leave the documents with you. Call me when you're ready to discuss terms. As Wyatt and I turned to leave, Elisa caught my arm. How long have you been planning this? I smiled. Since the day they made me sign that prenup. The drive home was silent until Wyatt pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. 10 years, he said quietly. You built an empire right under my nose for 10 years. I wanted to tell you so many times, I replied, turning to face him. But I needed to do this on my own. Show me, he said suddenly. Show me everything. 20 minutes later, we sat in my home office, a room Wyatt had always assumed was just for my charity work. I logged into my computer and pulled up the Artemis Group's main database. It started small, I explained, clicking through various projects. Remember that tiny consulting firm I started? The one in the spare bedroom of our first apartment? That's the one. Every client taught me something new. Every contract built my network. I pulled up an old photo of me and Christian working late in that cramped bedroom. Christian believed in me when no one else did. Except me, Wyatt interjected. I always believed in you. You did, I acknowledged, but you also let your family convince you I needed to be controlled. He flinched. The prenup, I agreed. Your mother's crowning achievement in protecting the family fortune from the gold-digging nobody. I clicked through more slides, showing the progression of my business. Each success led to bigger opportunities. I reinvested everything. Lived well below our means. Remember how your mother mocked my off-the-rack clothes? While you were secretly building a billion-dollar company. Wyatt shook his head in amazement. A knock at the door interrupted us. Elisa stood there, looking uncertain. I followed you, she admitted. I need to understand. I gestured for her to join us. Perfect timing. I was just showing Wyatt how it all started. Including how our family treated you, she asked quietly. I pulled up another file. Actually, you might be interested in this. Remember 3 years ago when you wanted to start your own fashion line? Elisa's eyes widened. The mysterious investor who backed out at the last minute. Was me, I confirmed. Through a shell company. Your parents had already sabotaged your plans by threatening other potential investors. I couldn't let them know I was involved. But why pull out? Because I saw how they were manipulating you, using the promise of funding to keep you under their control. I met her eyes. You needed to break free on your own terms. Like you did, she whispered. Look at this, Wyatt said, pointing to the screen. The Thompson Development Project, that was you. I nodded. Your father's biggest competitor. When they started struggling, I stepped in, saved 3,000 jobs and turned the company around. While Dad's project failed, Elisa added. Because he refused to listen to his advisors, I explained. His pride cost the company millions. My phone buzzed. A text from Christian. Board members are getting nervous. Luke's been making calls. Your father's trying to rally support, I told them, showing them the message. But he doesn't realize I've spent years building relationships with every major player in his company. What happens now? Wyatt asked. I pulled up one final document. This is my proposal for restructuring the company. New management, new direction, complete transparency. Mom will never accept it, Elisa said. She doesn't have a choice. The company's drowning in debt, and I own most of it. You could destroy them, Wyatt realized. I could, I agreed. One phone call and 10 generations of your family's legacy crumbles. But you won't, Elisa said with certainty. No, I won't, because this was never about destruction. It was about proving my worth. I closed my laptop. And about showing that success doesn't have to come at the cost of others' dignity. Wyatt took my hand. I'm sorry I didn't protect you from them. I didn't need protection, I replied. I needed respect, and now I've earned it. What about the charity foundation? Elisa asked. Was that all just a cover? I smiled, pulling up photos of the education centers we'd built, the scholarships we'd funded. The foundation is very real, because, unlike your parents, I believe wealth comes with responsibility. My phone buzzed again. Luke's name appeared on the screen. Ready to face them again? Wyatt asked. I stood up, straightening my shoulders. I've been ready for 10 years. I'm coming with you, Elisa declared. It's time someone stood up to them. As we prepared to leave, I caught my reflection in the window. The scared young bride was gone forever, replaced by someone who had turned rejection into resolve, and humiliation into triumph. Let's go show them what real business acumen looks like, I said, leading the way out. The Bryant mansion looked different in the harsh morning light, less intimidating, more like what it really was. A facade, hiding a crumbling foundation. Luke opened the door before we could ring the bell, his face haggard from a sleepless night. The board's revolting, he said without preamble. They're calling for an emergency meeting. I know, I replied, walking past him. I called it. Kylie stood in the study, surrounded by stacks of financial documents. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide her red-rimmed eyes. You've been busy, I observed, noting the empty coffee cups littering the desk. How did we miss this? She demanded. How did we not see you building this empire? Because you were too busy watching me fail, I answered. Every criticism, every snide remark about my clothes, my background, my ambitions. You were so focused on tearing me down that you never noticed me rising. Elisa stepped forward. I found something else, Mom. She placed a folder on the desk. The resort project in Barbados. The one that supposedly failed. It didn't fail at all. Luke's face went pale. Elisa, don't. The project was profitable, she continued. But someone siphoned off the funds. Someone with executive access to the accounts. Wyatt grabbed the folder. Dad, what did you do? What I had to do, Luke exploded. The lifestyle your mother demanded, the image we had to maintain, it all cost money. Money we didn't have, Kylie whispered, sinking into a chair. My phone buzzed, a message from Christian. Board members arriving at HQ, showtime. We need to go, I announced. The board meeting starts in an hour. To witness our humiliation, Kylie asked bitterly. To save your company, I corrected, unless you'd rather explain to your society friends why you're selling this house. The drive to headquarters was tense. I rode with Wyatt and Elisa, while Luke and Kylie followed in their car. As we pulled into the executive parking garage, I spotted familiar faces gathering, board members I'd cultivated relationships with over the years, never revealing my true identity. "Mrs. Harrison," called out George, the head of the board, "I didn't expect to see you here." "Actually," I said, extending my hand, "it's Mrs. Bryant, but you know me better as the CEO of Artemis Group." His jaw dropped. Around us, other board members whispered and pointed. "Shall we begin?" I gestured toward the elevator. The boardroom was packed. Luke and Kylie slipped in last, taking seats at the far end of the table. I stood at the head, my presentation ready. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "you're here because this company is in crisis. But what you don't know is that it's been in crisis for years." Slides appeared behind me, showing the true state of the company's finances. Gasps filled the room as the numbers revealed themselves. "However," I continued, "there's a solution. A merger with Artemis Group would not only save this company, but transform it into something stronger." "And who controls Artemis Group?" demanded one board member. "I do," I stated clearly. "The woman some of you may remember as the gold-digging bride who needed a prenup." The room erupted in murmurs. I caught Kylie shrinking in her seat. "My proposal is simple," I continued over the noise. "A complete restructuring, new management, transparent operations, and a focus on sustainable growth rather than maintaining appearances." "And the current leadership?" George asked, glancing at Luke. "We'll step down," I answered. "Immediately." Luke stood up abruptly. "Now wait just a minute. Sit down, Dad," Elisa commanded. "You lost the right to protest when you embezzled from your own company." More gasps. Luke collapsed back into his chair. I clicked to the next slide. "I've prepared a detailed transition plan. Each of you has a copy in front of you. Take an hour to review it. When we reconvene, we'll vote." As the board members filed out for the break, Kylie approached me. Her hands were shaking. "You could have destroyed us," she said quietly. "Yes." "Why didn't you?" I looked at Wyatt, who stood proudly by my side. "Because revenge wasn't worth destroying something that could be saved. But make no mistake, the old way of doing things ends today." "All those years," she murmured, "I thought I was protecting my family from you, but you were actually protecting it from us." "The vote will pass," I told her. "The board trusts me more than they trust Luke. The only question is whether you'll accept the changes with grace or force me to do this the hard way." She straightened her shoulders, a ghost of her old pride showing through. "And if we accept, then we build something better, together." I held out my hand. "Your choice." After a long moment, she took it. The vote was unanimous. As board members filed out of the room, Christian slipped in through the side door, tablet in hand. "You won't believe what I just found," he said, his face grim. "There's more to the story." "More than Dad's embezzlement?" Elisa asked. Christian placed his tablet on the table, pulling up a series of documents. These were buried deep in the company servers. Someone tried to delete them, but... He smiled. "Well, let's just say I'm very good at my job." I leaned forward, scanning the files. My breath caught. "Luke, care to explain why there's a second will?" Luke's head snapped up. "What?" "Your father's will," I clarified. "The one that supposedly left everything to you? Turns out there was another version, one that divided the company equally between you and your sister Margaret." Kylie's face went white. "Margaret died 20 years ago. In a car accident," Elisa added, "before I was born." "Did she?" Christian asked, sliding another document across the table. "Because according to these bank records, someone's been making regular payments to an account in Toronto under her name. Payments that started right after her death and continued until 3 months ago." The room fell silent. Luke stared at the documents, his hands trembling. "What did you do?" Kylie whispered. "I had no choice," Luke said hoarsely. "She was going to ruin everything. She wanted to sell, to break up the company. Our father's legacy." So you forced her out, I finished. Made her disappear, take the money and stay quiet, or else. Wyatt slammed his hand on the table. My God, Dad, your own sister? She's alive, Elisa asked, tears in her eyes. We have an aunt we never knew about. I pulled out my phone, dialing a number. Margaret? It's Aliyah. Yes, I found them. It's time. The door opened, and a woman walked in. She had Luke's eyes and Elisa's smile, though her hair had gone silver. Luke stumbled backward as if he'd seen a ghost. Hello, little brother, Margaret said quietly. Kylie grabbed the edge of the table for support. All these years. I'm sorry, Kylie, Margaret said. I wanted to reach out so many times, but the agreement Luke made me sign, which is now void, I interjected, along with any claim Luke had to sole ownership of the company. You knew? Luke demanded, turning to me. How long have you known? 3 months, I replied. When the payment stopped, Margaret reached out to Artemis Group for help. Imagine her surprise when she learned who I was. This whole time, Wyatt said, while you were buying up company debt, I was also helping your aunt prepare to reclaim her rightful place, I finished. The board has already approved her appointment as co-chair. Luke lunged forward. You can't... Sit down, Margaret commanded, and surprisingly, he did. You took 20 years of my life, Luke. 20 years away from my family, my home, my legacy. The only reason I'm not pressing charges is because of her. She nodded toward me. Why? Kylie asked me, her voice barely a whisper. Because sometimes healing is better than vengeance, I answered. And because this company needs both strength and compassion to survive. Elisa moved to stand beside her aunt, studying her face. You have Mom's old pictures, the ones that went missing. Margaret smiled, touching her niece's cheek. I took them when I left, to remember the family I lost. The family you can have again, I said firmly. If everyone is willing to move forward. Luke slumped in his chair, defeated. What happens now? Now, Margaret said, we rebuild. Together. But first, she turned to Kylie. I believe you owe your daughter-in-law an apology, a real one. Kylie stood slowly, her perfect posture finally cracking. Aliyah, Take your time, I said. We have plenty of it now. I was wrong, she managed. About everything. You weren't trying to steal from this family. You were trying to save it. From us. From what we'd become. Wyatt took my hand, squeezing it gently. The new board meets tomorrow, I announced. Margaret and I will lead the transition team. Luke, you'll provide a full accounting of all diverted funds. Kylie, you'll help Elisa launch her fashion line, properly this time. And me? Wyatt asked. I smiled. You, my love, get to watch your wife and aunt transform your family's company into something worthy of its name. Margaret picked up the original will, running her fingers over her father's signature. He would have liked you, Aliyah. You have his spirit. Speaking of spirit, Elisa said, wait until the society papers get hold of this story. They won't, I replied. Some things are better kept in the family. Now, shall we get to work? 3 weeks into the transition, I found Luke waiting in my office before dawn. The security logs showed he'd arrived at 4 a.m. Burning the midnight oil, I asked, setting down my coffee. We need to talk, he said, sliding a folder across my desk. Privately. I opened the folder and immediately recognized the pattern. More hidden accounts, more diverted funds, but these were different. These led to offshore holdings I hadn't discovered. How much, I asked. Enough to sink everything, he replied. Even your merger won't save us if this comes out. I studied his face, noting the calculated desperation in his eyes. What do you want, Luke? A deal, off the books. He leaned forward. I'll make these accounts disappear permanently. In exchange, I keep my position and full voting rights. Blackmailing your way back to power? I closed the folder. Not very original. I'm trying to protect this family. No, I said, standing up. You're trying to protect yourself. Again. The door opened, and Margaret walked in, followed by Wyatt and Elisa. Right on time, I said, handing Margaret the folder. Luke's face went pale. You knew they were coming. I knew you'd try something like this, I replied. The question was when, not if. We've been tracking your movements for days, Wyatt said, his voice hard. Every call, every meeting, every desperate attempt to hide what's left of your schemes. Elisa stepped forward. Did you really think you could outmaneuver her, after everything we've seen? You don't understand, Luke protested. These accounts, if they become public— They already are, Margaret interrupted, turning on the television mounted on the wall. The morning news was running a special report. Breaking, major corporate corruption exposed. Anonymous whistleblower reveals decades of financial fraud. You didn't, Luke whispered. I didn't, I confirmed. You did. Every desperate move you made in the past 3 weeks. We were waiting, watching, documenting. The SEC has everything, Margaret added. Every account, every transaction, every attempt to cover your tracks. Luke lunged for the door, but Wyatt blocked his path. Sit down, Dad. It's over. The reporters will be here in an hour, I said, checking my watch. The board in 2. By noon, the markets will open, and everyone will know. You'll destroy the company, Luke said. Everything I built. Everything you stole, Elisa corrected. From Aunt Margaret, from the shareholders, from all of us. But the company won't be destroyed, I assured him, because while you were plotting this sad little coup, we were preparing. I pulled up the presentation on my laptop. Every major shareholder has been briefed. Every partner has been assured. The merger is proceeding with full transparency, including the exposure of past misdeeds. The stock will tank, he protested. Temporarily, Margaret agreed. And then it will recover, stronger than ever, because for the first time in decades, this company will be run with integrity. A knock at the door. Kylie entered, her face set in grim determination. The lawyers are here, she announced, and I've signed the papers. Luke's head snapped up. What papers? Divorce papers, Kylie said quietly. I won't be dragged down with you, Luke. Not anymore. Mom, Wyatt breathed. I've spent 30 years turning a blind eye, Kylie continued, telling myself it was for the family, for our legacy. But the real legacy is standing right here. She gestured to me. The woman we tried to keep out is the one who saved us all. Security is waiting downstairs, I said to Luke. They'll escort you out quietly if you go now. Make a scene, and they'll do it in front of the arriving press. Luke stood slowly, his empire crumbling before his eyes. You think you've won? This was never about winning, I replied. It was about doing what's right, something you forgot a long time ago. I'll fight this, he threatened. No, Margaret said, you won't. Because if you do, the next documents I release will be about Sarah. Luke went completely still. You know about Sarah? Your other secret? Margaret's voice was ice. Your other family? Yes, we know. So take the quiet exit, Luke, while you still can. As security led him away, I turned to the others. Ready to face the press? Wyatt took my hand. Together. The way it always should have been, Elisa added. Kylie straightened her shoulders, years of pretense falling away. Show us how it's done, Aaliyah. Show us how to build something real. I looked at my family. Not the one I married into, but the one we were becoming. Let's go make history. The elevator dinged, and we could hear the first reporters arriving in the lobby below. It was time to step into the light. The press conference was a circus. Camera flashes exploded as we took our seats at the long table, microphones arranged before us like soldiers standing at attention. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, thank you for coming. Today marks a new chapter in our company's history. A reporter's hand shot up immediately. Is it true Luke has been arrested? My father, Wyatt answered, his voice steady, is cooperating with authorities. We'll let the justice system handle that aspect. Ms. Margaret, another reporter called out, how does it feel to return after 20 years? Margaret smiled, the cameras catching her grace under pressure. Like coming home, but more importantly, like being part of something honest and new. Mrs. Bryant, several voices called out at once. I nodded to a reporter in the front row. Your rise from supposed gold digger to corporate savior is remarkable. Was this revenge? No, I said firmly. This was restoration, of value, of integrity, and of family. Kylie stepped forward to the microphone, surprising us all. If I may, she said, her voice clear and strong, I owe everyone in this room an apology, but especially my daughter-in-law. The room fell silent. 10 years ago, I forced this brilliant woman to sign a prenuptial agreement because I thought she was beneath us. Today, she sits here having saved not just our company, but our family's soul. Cameras clicked frantically as Kylie turned to face me directly. Aaliyah, I was wrong. Catastrophically, unforgivably wrong. And I'm not just apologizing to you, but to every person I've ever looked down on, every employee I've belittled, every life I've touched with my arrogance. Elisa reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. A business reporter stood up. The stock has dropped 30% since the announcement. How do you plan to stabilize the company? I gestured to Christiane, who distributed packets to the press. Inside, you'll find our complete restructuring plan. The merger between Artemis Group and the existing company creates one of the strongest entities in the market. More importantly, it's built on a foundation of transparency. And the leadership structure, someone else called out. Margaret and I will co-chair the board, I announced. Elisa will head our new fashion division. Wyatt will lead international operations. And Kylie will be stepping back, Kylie finished. It's time for new blood, new ideas, and new values. The questions continued for an hour. We answered each one directly, honestly, holding nothing back. As the conference wound down, a young reporter raised her hand. Mrs. Bryant, what would you say to other women facing discrimination and prejudice in corporate America? I leaned into the microphone. Build your own table. They may not let you sit at theirs, but nothing stops you from creating something better. And when you succeed, remember to leave room for others to join you. After the press cleared out, we gathered in the boardroom. The stock had stabilized, ending only 15% down, better than expected. They're calling you the silent queen on social media, Elisa said, showing me her phone. The woman who built an empire in secret while they underestimated her. I prefer just Aaliyah, I replied, but I was smiling. Margaret's phone buzzed. The SEC just released their initial findings. Luke's looking at serious time. Sarah's reached out, Kylie said quietly. His other wife, she wants to meet. Wyatt ran his hands through his hair. I still can't believe he had another family. People will surprise you, I said. Sometimes with their capacity for deception, sometimes with their capacity for growth. I looked meaningfully at Kylie. Speaking of growth, Elisa interjected, wait until you see the designs for the new fashion line. Aunt Margaret's been helping me. First, I said, standing up, we need to address the employees. They deserve to hear the truth from us directly. We made our way to the company auditorium, where hundreds of nervous employees waited. As we walked onto the stage, I saw fear in their eyes. Fear of losing jobs, of change, of an uncertain future. Your jobs are safe, I began, and a collective breath of relief filled the room. In fact, we're expanding, but more importantly, you'll now be working for a company you can be proud of. No more hiding, Margaret added, no more fear, no more hierarchy based on anything but merit, Kylie continued. As we laid out our plans, I watched hope replace fear in their eyes. This was the real victory, not the revenge I'd once dreamed of, but the chance to build something meaningful from the ashes of deception. Wyatt took my hand as we finished speaking. Ready for what comes next? I looked at our strange, broken, healing family on stage. More than ready. This is just the beginning. The autumn breeze carried the scent of coffee and fresh pastries through the open windows of my office. On my desk sat the morning's newspaper, its headline still surreal. Corporate Phoenix rises, company value doubles under new leadership. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Christian entered, grinning. The last of Luke's hidden accounts has been cleaned up. It's officially over. Nothing's ever really over, I replied, but I was smiling too. How's the new security system? Impenetrable. No one will be able to hide financial misconduct again. He paused. Luke's sentencing is tomorrow. I know. Wyatt's going. Are you? Before I could answer, Elisa burst in, her arms full of design portfolios. The Paris Fashion Week invitations just arrived, and you'll never believe who's coming with us. Try me, I said, already knowing. Mom! Elisa's eyes sparkled. She's been helping with the designs. Actually helping, not just criticizing. And Aunt Margaret's handling the business negotiations. The door opened again, and Kylie herself walked in, looking different than I'd ever seen her. Gone were the designer suits and perfect coif. Instead, she wore jeans and a simple blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders. The models are ready for the final fitting, she announced, and I've been thinking about adding a line for working women. Practical, but elegant. Like you've become, I suggested. She smiled, a real smile, not the society mask she used to wear. I'm learning. Finally. Margaret joined us, tablet in hand. The board meeting's about to start, ready to show them the quarterly results. Actually, I said, I thought you should present them. You've earned it. Her eyes widened. Aaliyah, the company was always meant to be yours too, I reminded her. Time to take your place fully. Wyatt appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here you all need to meet. He stepped aside, revealing a woman in her early 30s who shared Luke's features. Sarah, his daughter from his other family. I hope I'm not intruding, she said nervously. Kylie moved first, surprising us all by embracing her. Your family, you belong here. The board's waiting, Christian reminded us gently. Let them wait, I said. This is more important. We gathered around my office's seating area, this strange patchwork family brought together by secrets and lies, but healing through truth. I never thought I'd be grateful for that prenup, I admitted, but it led to all of this. To think, Elisa mused, if Mum and Dad hadn't been so awful to you, we'd all still be living lies, Kylie finished. Sometimes the worst things we do lead to the best outcomes. My phone buzzed, a message from the detention center where Luke was being held. He was asking to see me before tomorrow's sentencing. Go, Wyatt said, reading my expression. End this chapter properly. The detention center was cold and grey. Luke sat at the visitors' table, orange jumpsuit a far cry from his custom suits. You won, he said as I sat down. No one won, Luke, but some good came from it. Sarah, you found her? She found us. She's strong, brilliant, and wants to know her siblings. He slumped. I destroyed everything. No, I corrected. You tried to control everything, and it broke. But we rebuilt something better from the pieces. Why are you here? To tell you that your family is okay. Different, but okay. Kylie is designing clothes with Elisa. Margaret is thriving. Wyatt is the leader he was always meant to be. And Sarah, she's healing too. And you, still enjoying your revenge? This stopped being about revenge a long time ago. It's about legacy now. The right kind. I stood to leave, then paused. The company will support your other family too. It's the right thing to do. Back at the office, I found everyone gathered in the boardroom. The quarterly results were displayed on the screen. Record profits, soaring stock prices, unprecedented growth. To new beginnings, Margaret proposed, raising her coffee cup. To family, Kylie added, in all its forms. To truth, Elisa chimed in. To love, Wyatt said, taking my hand. I looked around at these people who had become so much more than in-laws. To all of it, I said. The good, the bad, the ugly truth, and the beautiful aftermath. Sarah raised her cup too, finally belonging. To second chances. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, we had built something rare and precious. A family forged not by blood or marriage contracts, but by choice and change and challenge overcome. Ready for the board? Christian asked. I squeezed Wyatt's hand and smiled. Ready for anything.
The day my mother stole my company, she wore her favorite pearl necklace and that signature red lipstick that always made her look like she was going to war. I should have known something was wrong when she insisted on meeting at her lawyer's office instead of over our usual Friday lunch. My name is Sylvia, and until yesterday, I was the CEO of Stellar Events, Chicago's fastest-growing event planning company. 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears had transformed my little startup into a multi-million-dollar operation. Now, I'm sitting in my empty apartment nursing a glass of wine, wondering how I didn't see this coming. "Darling, this is for your own protection," Mom had said, sliding the papers across the mahogany desk. "The market is volatile. You're young, inexperienced with real crisis management. Let me handle this." "Protection?" I'd laughed, scanning the documents. "This is a complete transfer of ownership, Mom. You're taking my company." "I'm securing your future," she replied, her voice sharp as a blade. "Your father would have wanted—" "Don't you dare bring Dad into this." I slammed my hand on the desk, making her lawyer flinch. "He believed in me. He supported my dreams. You're just being a mother." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Sign the papers, Sylvia. Don't make this difficult." "Or what?" Her smile turned cold. "Or I'll have to remind you who co-signed your initial business loans, who introduced you to half your client base, who has the power to make every single one of those clients disappear overnight." My hands shook as I remembered all the times she'd helped me over the years. Each favor, each introduction, each piece of advice. They weren't maternal support. They were hooks, slowly sinking into my flesh, giving her leverage for this exact moment. "You planned this from the beginning," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "Every time you offered help, I taught you everything you know about business, darling. Did you really think I wouldn't have an exit strategy?" She tapped the papers with her perfectly manicured nail. "Sign." I signed. What choice did I have? She'd orchestrated everything perfectly, like one of her famous hostile takeovers. Only this time, her target was her own daughter. Hours later, my phone buzzed. It was Taya, my best friend from back home. "Sylvia, are you okay? I just saw the press release about Stellar Events' change in management." I laughed bitterly. "That's what they're calling it? What happened?" "Remember how you always said my mother was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers? Turns out I was just another pawn." My voice cracked. "I lost everything, Taya. My company, my clients, my reputation. Come home," she said without hesitation. "Your old room at my place is still free. The coast will do you good." I can't just run away. It's not running away. It's regrouping. Remember what Coach Martinez used to say? Sometimes you need to step back to see the whole field. I glanced around my luxury apartment, filled with things I probably couldn't afford anymore. My mother's voice echoed in my head. "Never show weakness. Never admit defeat. Never let them see you bleed." Well, guess what, Mom? I'm bleeding. But you taught me something else, too. The best revenge requires patience, planning, and perfect timing. "Taya," I wiped my eyes, straightening my spine. "I'll be there tomorrow. That's my girl. We'll figure this out together." After hanging up, I walked to my window, looking out at the Chicago skyline I'd conquered once before. My mother thought she was teaching me a lesson in power. Instead, she taught me exactly how to destroy someone from the inside out. Every manipulation, every calculated move, every cruel strategy, I'd learned from the best. I pulled out my laptop and started typing. Resignation effective immediately. The email was short, professional, and would hit every major client's inbox by morning. Let Mom deal with the chaos of mass client confusion. It's not like she could blame me. After all, she just effectively fired me from my own company. My phone pinged with a text from her. I expect you in the office at 8 a.m. sharp. We need to discuss transition protocols. I didn't reply. Instead, I booked a one-way ticket to the coast and started packing. Mom always said business was war, and she just launched the first attack. But she forgot something crucial. She taught me everything I know about warfare. Game on, Mother. You wanted to teach me a lesson? Well, class is in session. The salty breeze hit my face as I stepped out of Taya's beat-up Jeep. Seabrook hadn't changed much in the decade since I'd left. Same weathered boardwalk, same peeling paint on the storefronts, same seagulls fighting over forgotten French fries. Home sweet home, Taya said, grabbing one of my bags. Though I guess it's a bit different from your Chicago penthouse. Actually, it's exactly what I need right now. I inhaled deeply, letting the familiar scent of ocean air replace the knot in my stomach. Somewhere my mother wouldn't be caught dead visiting. We climbed the stairs to Taya's apartment above the local bookstore. The wooden steps creaked under our feet, each sound a childhood memory flooding back. Your timing's perfect, actually, Taya said, unlocking the door. The summer festival committee is desperate for help. Their event planner just bailed. I froze. Taya, I didn't come here to. To what? Use your award-winning skills to help your hometown? Heaven forbid. She pushed the door open, revealing her cozy two-bedroom apartment. Besides, you need a distraction, an income. Before I could argue, my phone buzzed. Another news notification about stellar events. I clicked it before I could stop myself. Emerson Whitfield announces innovative direction for stellar events. I read aloud, my voice bitter. She's already rebranding everything I built. Hey, Taya snatched my phone. No more hate-reading news about your mom. New rule. A knock at the door interrupted us. Joseph, my old high school debate partner, stood there with a casserole dish and a sympathetic smile. Thought you might need some comfort food, he said, stepping inside. My mom's famous mac and cheese. Still your favorite? Joseph? I couldn't help but smile. You haven't changed a bit. Except now he owns half the commercial real estate in town, Taya chimed in. Including the building where they're holding the summer festival? Joseph shot her a look. Subtle. What? She needs a project. You need an event planner. It's perfect. I held up my hands. Guys, I appreciate this, but I'm not ready to. Jump back into event planning? Joseph set down the casserole. Good, because this isn't some corporate gala. This is about community, something your mother never understood. The mention of my mother made me wince, but he had a point. She'd always dismissed small-town events as quaint and provincial, just like she'd dismissed my initial dreams of starting small and growing organically. Fine, I said. Tell me about this festival. Joseph's face lit up. Let's discuss it over dinner. I know a quiet place. No, Taya interrupted. We're eating this casserole and drinking the emergency wine I've been saving, and you're both going to help me convince Sylvia that this town needs her. 3 hours and 2 bottles of wine later, we'd spread documents across Taya's coffee table. The festival's previous plans were basic, almost amateur. See? Joseph pointed to the budget. They're thinking too small. This could be huge for local businesses. And look at this venue layout. I muttered, sketching on a napkin. If we move the main stage here, added vendor booths along the boardwalk. There's my event planner. Taya grinned. A text notification lit up my phone. My mother's name made my stomach lurch. Darling, your absence today was noted. Let's discuss your role in the new organization structure over dinner tomorrow. The usual place. I showed the others the message. Delete it, Joseph said firmly. You're not her puppet anymore. As I reached to delete it, another message arrived. This one from an unknown number. Ms. Whitfield, I have information about your mother's business practices that might interest you. Meet me at the Harbor Cafe tomorrow at 2 p.m. That's cryptic, Taya said, reading over my shoulder. And potentially dangerous, Joseph added. You can't go alone. I won't. I looked up at my friends, feeling stronger than I had in days. You're coming with me, both of you. Now that's the Sylvia I remember, Taya smiled, the one who never backed down from a challenge. I picked up the festival plans again, my mind already racing with possibilities. Maybe Joseph was right. Maybe this wasn't about jumping back into event planning. Maybe it was about remembering who I was before my mother's influence, before Chicago, before everything went wrong. One condition, I said, looking at them both. If I do this festival, we do it my way. No holding back. We show this town, and my mother, what real event planning looks like. Deal, they said in unison. As we worked late into the night, I felt something I hadn't experienced since starting Stellar Events. Pure, uncomplicated joy in creating something special. Tomorrow might bring mysterious meetings and more maternal drama, but tonight, surrounded by old friends and new possibilities, I was exactly where I needed to be. The Harbor Cafe smelled like coffee and secrets. I arrived early with Taya and Joseph, choosing a corner booth with a clear view of both entrances. At exactly 2 p.m., a man in a crisp suit walked in, scanning the room until his eyes landed on me. Ms. Whitfield, he extended his hand. I'm Elijah, a corporate lawyer. Thank you for meeting me. These are my associates, I said, gesturing to my friends. His presence felt too polished for our small coastal town. Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of them. He slid into the booth, placing a thick manila envelope on the table. I represent several investors who've had concerning dealings with your mother. Join the club, I muttered. This is different. He lowered his voice. We've uncovered some irregularities in her business practices, patterns that extend back years, including her recent acquisition of your company. My heart raced as he pulled documents from the envelope. Financial statements, contracts, emails, all bearing my mother's distinctive signature. She's been running a sophisticated scheme, Elijah explained, creating shell companies, manipulating valuations, using inside information to orchestrate takeovers. Joseph leaned forward, his real estate experience showing. These property transfers, they're all dated within days of major market shifts. Exactly. Elijah nodded. Your mother didn't just take your company, Ms. Whitfield. She's been systematically absorbing businesses for years, using information she shouldn't have had access to. But why come to me? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Because you're the only one who knows how she operates from the inside, and because, he hesitated, we found your father's old files. The cafe suddenly felt too warm. What about my father? Your mother claimed she inherited his shares in the family business after his death, correct? When I nodded, Elijah pulled out another document. This suggests otherwise. Your father left his shares to you in a trust that would mature on your 30th birthday. But I never received any shares, I whispered. She told me Dad left everything to her. Exactly. Elijah's expression hardened. She intercepted the trust documents and forged your signature. You should have gained control of the family business 2 years ago. Taya grabbed my hand under the table as Joseph swore quietly. We need your help, Elijah continued. With your testimony and these documents, we can build a case, but it has to be handled carefully. Your mother has powerful friends. And enemies, apparently. I studied him. Who are these investors you represent? People who want justice, including Juliana Franklin. I nearly choked on my coffee. Juliana, my mother's pet protege? Former protege. Your mother burned her too, about 6 months ago. She's been gathering evidence ever since. My phone buzzed. Another text from my mother. Your silence is childish, Sylvia. Don't forget who taught you everything you know. Looking at her message, something clicked. The summer festival, I said suddenly. We can use it. What do you mean? Taya asked. My mother monitors everything I do, right? So let's give her something to monitor. A big, splashy event that'll keep her attention while we work with Elijah. Joseph caught on immediately. The perfect distraction, and with my properties involved, it'll look like you're just trying to rebuild your career in a small market. She'll underestimate it, I nodded, just like she underestimated me. It's risky, Elijah warned. If she suspects anything, she won't, because she believes I'm exactly what she made me, ambitious but ultimately weak, talented but easily controlled. I straightened my spine. She has no idea who I really am. And who's that? Taya asked softly. My father's daughter. I turned to Elijah. I'll help you, but on one condition. When this is over, I want everything in the open. Every scheme, every lie, every manipulation. The world needs to know exactly who Emerson Whitfield is. He nodded solemnly. That's the plan. Are you ready for what that means? This could get ugly. It already is ugly. I gathered the documents, my mind racing with possibilities. Send everything you have to my secure email and get me a meeting with Juliana. As we left the cafe, Joseph pulled me aside. Are you sure about this? Taking on your mother legally. It's not just business anymore. It was never just business. I watched a seagull dive for a discarded sandwich. She didn't just steal my company, Joseph. She stole my inheritance, my confidence, my trust. She stole years of my life. And now? I smiled, feeling more like myself than I had in years. Now I'm taking it all back. Starting with this festival, we're going to make it so spectacular that every media outlet in the region will cover it. Perfect bait, Taya grinned. Exactly. I linked arms with my friends as we walked along the boardwalk. Mom always said the best traps are the ones your target walks into willingly. Behind us, Elijah made a phone call. She's in. Tell Juliana to get ready. The game is on. The coffee shop buzzed with morning energy as Juliana slid into the seat across from me. She looked different from the last time I'd seen her. Less polished, more human. The designer blazer was replaced with a casual sweater, her trademark severe bun now a relaxed ponytail. I have to admit, she said, stirring her latte, I never thought we'd be on the same side. Funny how betrayal changes things. I pushed a folder across the table. These are my plans for the summer festival. Take a look. Her eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. This is ambitious. Celebrity chefs, regional artists, corporate sponsorships? In Seabrook? Think bigger. I leaned forward. We're not just planning a festival. We're creating bait. Every major media outlet within 300 miles will cover this. And where there's press, Emerson will come sniffing around, Juliana finished, understanding dawning on her face. She won't be able to resist. Exactly, but I need your help. You still have connections with the sponsors she stole from me. Juliana's expression hardened. Not just from you. That woman promised me partnership, mentorship. Instead, she used my contacts, drained my resources, and left me with nothing but debt and broken promises. Sounds familiar. I pulled out my phone, showing her the latest press release about stellar events. She's already rebranding everything. New logo, new direction, new everything. Classic Emerson. Juliana's laugh was bitter. You know what she told me when she cut me loose? Darling, business is like surgery. Sometimes you have to cut away the dead weight to save the patient. She told me business was war. Maybe it's both. Juliana straightened. I'll make the calls. Every sponsor she stole, every contact she burned, they'll all hear about this festival. The bell above the door chimed as Joseph rushed in, waving a newspaper. You need to see this. The headline made my stomach drop. Stellar Events announces major expansion, plans to acquire regional event companies. She's coming for the small markets, I whispered. She's going to crush every independent event planner from here to Chicago. Not if we stop her first. Joseph spread out his own documents. I've been going through the property records Elijah sent. Your mother's shell companies have been buying up venues all over the region. Small theaters, conference centers, historic buildings. Creating a monopoly, Juliana nodded. Control the venues. Control the industry. My phone buzzed with a text from Taya. Local Business Association meeting in 10 minutes. They're talking about selling the community center to a major development group. Get here now. She's already here, I said, showing them the message. She's making her move on Seabrook. We raced to the community center, arriving just as the meeting was starting. The room was packed with familiar faces, shop owners, restaurateurs, people I'd known my whole life. The offer is quite generous, the association president was saying. The development group assures us they'll maintain the building's historic character while modernizing the facilities and pricing out local events, I called out, stepping forward. Every head turned. That generous offer comes with strings. Trust me, I know exactly how this plays out. Sylvia? The president blinked. This is a closed meeting. I'm a local business owner now. I gestured to Joseph. Or I will be once Joseph and I finalize our partnership for the summer festival. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Joseph stepped up beside me. Before anyone votes on selling, you should know what happened in other towns that accepted similar offers. Show them, Sylvia. I projected Juliana's research onto the wall. Graphs showing skyrocketing venue rental costs, statistics on failed local businesses, testimonials from other communities. This isn't development, I declared. It's corporate colonization, and it's being orchestrated by someone who sees your community center as just another piece on her chessboard. Your mother, someone in the crowd said quietly. Yes, and if you sell to her shell company, the summer festival will be the last affordable community event ever held in this building. The room erupted in discussion. I felt Juliana touch my arm. Nice speech, but your mother won't take this lying down. I'm counting on it. I watched the association members huddle together, voting ballots in hand. The more she fights, the more attention she draws, and attention is exactly what we need. My phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Bold move, darling, but remember who taught you to play chess. See you at the festival. Mom. I showed it to Juliana and Joseph. She took the bait. The trap is set, Juliana agreed. But Sylvia, are you ready for what happens when it springs? Looking around the community center, at the faces of people who'd known me since childhood, I felt a certainty I hadn't experienced since before my mother's betrayal. Ready? I smiled grimly. I've been preparing for this my whole life. She made sure of that. 3 weeks before the festival, chaos erupted in Taya's apartment-turned-command center. Phones rang constantly, papers covered every surface, and my laptop pinged with endless email notifications. The celebrity chef just doubled his appearance fee, Joseph announced, hanging up his phone. Says he got a better offer from another event. Let me guess, I said, not looking up from my spreadsheet. Stellar Events? Bingo, your mother's trying to poach our headliners. Taya burst through the door, looking frazzled. The printing company just canceled our order for promotional materials, said there was a computer glitch with our deposit. She's getting sloppy, Juliana remarked, walking in behind Taya. These are amateur tactics. No, I corrected. She's getting desperate. Elijah's investigation must be making her nervous. I pulled up my contacts list. I've got a backup printer in Portland who owes me a favor. Taya, call that food truck guy you dated. His brother's a chef, right? The one who trained in Paris? Yeah, but get him. He's better than the celebrity chef anyway, and he's local. Joseph, how's the venue security? Tight. I've changed all the access codes and installed new cameras. If anyone tries anything, my phone rang, displaying my mother's number. The room fell silent. Put it on speaker, Juliana whispered. I nodded and answered. Hello, Mother. Darling. Her voice dripped honey-coated venom. I've been hearing interesting things about your little festival. Have you? I thought you didn't concern yourself with provincial events. Don't be cute, Sylvia. What are you trying to prove? That you taught me well. I kept my voice steady. Isn't that what you wanted? What I want, she hissed, is for you to stop this ridiculous revenge plot. You're embarrassing yourself. Really? Because our ticket sales suggest otherwise. We're trending on local social media, and 3 major networks are covering the event. Silence crackled over the line. When she spoke again, her tone had changed. We could work together, you know. Come back to Chicago. I'll give you a division of your own. Like you gave Juliana. Another pause. I see. You've been making friends. No, Mother. I've been making allies. Something you never understood the difference between. Last chance, Sylvia. Cancel the festival or what? You'll destroy me? Take everything? Too late. I glanced at my friends, drawing strength from their presence. See you at the festival, Mother. Don't forget to bring your checkbook. We're raising money for small business protection funds. I hung up before she could respond. The room remained quiet for a moment before Taya broke the tension. Okay, that was badass. And dangerous, Elijah said, appearing in the doorway. She'll retaliate. Already has. I showed him my laptop screen. 3 vendors canceled in the last hour, but look at this. I pulled up another email, this one from a major business journal. They want to do a feature story on the festival. Small town revival, how local events are fighting corporate takeover. Perfect timing, Elijah smiled, because I just got the final piece we needed. He placed a USB drive on the table, your father's original trust documents, complete with your mother's forged signatures. The forensics report came back positive. My hands shook as I reached for the drive. This proves she stole my inheritance and committed fraud. The SEC is very interested in her activities over the past 5 years. Joseph's phone buzzed. His face darkened as he read the message. Speaking of activities, your mother just bought the old marina through one of her shell companies. She's planning something big. The marina? Taya frowned. But that's where we're setting up the main stage for the festival. She can't stop the festival, I said firmly. The contract with the city is ironclad, but she's sending a message. She's not just coming for the event, she's coming for the whole town. Juliana started pacing, her event planner mind working overtime. We need to accelerate the plan, move up the timeline. No, Elijah cautioned. The SEC needs more time to build their case. We don't have more time, I argued, pulling up the marina purchase details. Look at the closing date, 3 days before the festival. She's going to try to shut us down at the last minute, create maximum chaos. Then we give her chaos, Taya suggested, just on our terms. A plan started forming in my mind. Joseph, how quickly can you get the local business association together? Tonight, if needed. Why? I smiled, feeling that familiar rush of adrenaline that came with orchestrating a perfect event. Because we're going to give my mother exactly what she wants, a very public showdown. But this time, I'm choosing the battlefield. The festival? Juliana asked. The festival, I confirmed. Mom always said timing is everything in business. Well, she's about to learn that timing can be a weapon, too. Elijah nodded slowly. I'll make some calls. Get ready, everyone. The next 48 hours are going to be intense. They already are, I said. watching another vendor cancellation pop up on my screen. But that's okay. Sometimes you have to break things to build them back better. The morning of the festival dawned bright and clear, with a breeze that carried the promise of summer. I stood at the marina, watching food trucks line up and vendors set up their stalls. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. "She's here," Taya announced, jogging up to me. "Your mother just checked into the Harbor Hotel, and she's not alone." "Let me guess, lawyers?" "And the press, lots of press." I smiled grimly. "Good, that's exactly what we want." My phone buzzed with a message from Elijah. "SEC agents in position. Remember, keep her talking." The festival grounds transformed as the morning progressed. Local artists hung their work along the boardwalk. The smell of gourmet food filled the air, and crowds began pouring in. Every few minutes, someone would stop me to say how amazing everything looked, how this was exactly what the town needed. "Sylvia," Joseph's voice cut through the crowd. "Channel 7 wants an interview. They're setting up by the main stage." "Perfect timing." I checked my watch. "Mom should be here any minute." As if on cue, a sleek black car pulled up. My mother stepped out, wearing her signature power suit and those pearls. Two men in suits flanked her, carrying briefcases. "Darling," she called out, loud enough for nearby reporters to hear. What a charming little event. Though I'm afraid there's been a terrible misunderstanding about the venue. "No misunderstanding, Mother." I gestured to the crowds. "The festival has all necessary permits, and look, it's a huge success." "A success built on borrowed time." She smiled tightly. "I own this marina now, and I'm afraid I'll have to ask everyone to leave, immediately." Cameras started rolling. Phones came out. This was exactly what we'd planned for. "Actually," I said clearly, "you don't own the marina, not legally anyway." Her smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" "The shell company you used to purchase this property? It's under investigation by the SEC, along with several other companies you've used for similar acquisitions." One of her lawyers whispered something in her ear. Her face paled slightly. "This is absurd," she snapped. "You're causing a scene." "No, Mother, I'm exposing one, just like you exposed my incompetence when you stole my company." I stepped closer. "Or should we talk about Dad's trust, the one you forged my signature on?" The crowd had grown silent, watching our confrontation like a tennis match. Reporters scribbled frantically. "You ungrateful little—" She caught herself, aware of the audience. "Everything I did was to protect you." "Was it? Or was it to protect your empire?" I nodded to Juliana, who emerged from the crowd with a tablet. "Show them." Juliana connected the tablet to the main stage's giant screens. Financial records, forged documents, and damning emails filled the display. "Ladies and gentlemen," Juliana announced, "let me show you how Emerson Whitfield really builds her business empire." My mother's face contorted with rage. "Stop this immediately." "Or what?" I challenged. "You'll destroy me? Take everything?" "You already tried that, but you forgot something important, Mother. You taught me too well." "Ms. Whitfield?" A man in a dark suit approached, flanked by others. "I'm with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We need you to come with us." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Phones recorded everything. My mother's lawyers huddled around her, speaking urgently. "This isn't over," she hissed at me. "Actually, it is." I held up my phone, showing her the breaking news alert. "Stellar Events CEO under investigation. Fraud and corporate misconduct alleged." As the SEC agents led her away, the festival continued around us. Music played, people danced, life went on. Taya appeared at my side, squeezing my hand. "You okay?" "I think so." I watched my mother's car disappear. "It doesn't feel real yet." "Ms. Whitfield," a reporter approached, "would you comment on your mother's arrest and the future of Stellar Events?" I thought about all the lessons my mother had taught me about handling the press. Instead, I chose honesty. This festival isn't about stellar events or corporate takeovers, I said. It's about community, about remembering that success doesn't have to come at someone else's expense. My mother never understood that, but I do, and that's why I'm announcing the creation of the Seabrook Small Business Fund, using all proceeds from today's event. The crowd cheered. Joseph appeared with champagne, passing glasses around to our core team. To Sylvia, he toasted, who proved that the best revenge isn't just success, it's success with integrity. As the sun set over the marina, casting golden light across the festival, I finally felt the weight lift from my shoulders. My phone buzzed one last time, a message from Elijah. Board of Directors called an emergency meeting. They want you to take over Stellar Events. Your father's shares are being transferred to your name. It's over. I looked around at the joyful crowds, the local vendors, my loyal friends. No, I said softly, it's just beginning. The courthouse steps felt colder than they should have for a summer morning. I sat there, coffee growing cold in my hands, waiting for Elijah to emerge with news from my mother's bail hearing. You didn't have to come, Taya said, settling beside me. The lawyers could have handled this. I needed to see it for myself. I watched reporters gathering at the bottom of the steps. 3 weeks since the festival, and they're still circling like vultures. The heavy doors creaked open. My mother emerged, flanked by her legal team. She looked smaller somehow, her designer suit slightly wrinkled, her makeup not quite perfect. Our eyes met across the distance. Sylvia. She moved toward me, ignoring her lawyer's attempts to stop her. We need to talk. I think we're past that point, Mother. They're trying to put me in prison. Her voice cracked slightly. Your own mother, is that what you wanted? What I wanted? I stood up, anger burning through my practiced calm. I wanted a mother who supported me, not one who saw me as competition. I wanted to make you proud, not prove myself worthy of basic respect. Everything I did was for yourself. I cut her off. The SEC found everything, Mom. The offshore accounts, the insider trading, the forged documents, even Dad's real will. She flinched at that. Your father was weak. He would have let the business stagnate, content with small successes. No, he understood something you never did. Success isn't just about numbers. It's about legacy. Elijah emerged from the courthouse, carrying a thick folder. Bail's been set at $5 million, but there's something else. He handed me a document. Your mother's board of directors just voted. They're formally requesting you take control of Stellar Events. My mother's face went white. They can't do that. I built that company. No, I corrected, scanning the document. You stole that company, multiple companies actually, and now they're all being investigated. Sylvia, please. She reached for my hand. For a moment, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Help me fix this. We could run it together, the way I always planned. Always planned? I laughed bitterly. You planned to break me, control me, mold me into your image. Well, congratulations, Mother. You succeeded in teaching me everything I needed to know about power and betrayal. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing. My mother's lawyers moved to shield her, but she pushed them away. You'll regret this, she hissed. You think running a company is easy? You think you can do better than me? I already am. I pulled out my phone, showing her the latest news. Stellar Events stock is up 15% since your arrest. The market likes the idea of ethical leadership. Taya touched my arm. We should go. The press conference starts in an hour. My mother's eyes narrowed. Press conference? I'm announcing the merger of Stellar Events with several smaller planning companies, including Juliana's. We're creating a network of independent event planners, sharing resources while maintaining local control. You're dismantling everything I built. No, I'm building something better, something that helps people instead of crushing them. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Mom, I'm keeping the pearl necklace you gave me. Consider it a reminder of everything you taught me about karma. As we walked away, her voice carried across the courthouse steps. I made you who you are. No, I called back without turning. You showed me who I never want to be. In the car, Taya finally spoke. Are you okay? Not really. I watched the courthouse disappear in the rearview mirror. But I will be. My phone buzzed with a message from Joseph. Venue's ready for the press conference. You should see what Juliana did with the place. Another text followed, this one from an unknown number. Ms. Whitfield, this is Amanda from the DA's office. We need to discuss your testimony for the upcoming trial. I closed the messages without responding. There would be time for that later. Right now, I had a company to rebuild and a legacy to create. You know what the hardest part is? I said to Taya as we drove through familiar streets. Part of me still loves her. Part of me still wants her approval. That's because you're human, Sylvia. It's what makes you different from her. We pulled up to the venue, the same community center we'd saved from my mother's takeover. Inside, Juliana had transformed the space into something elegant yet welcoming. Local business owners mingled with corporate executives. Reporters set up their equipment, and in the corner, Joseph was hanging a new sign. Stellar Network, Community First, Success Second. Ready? Taya squeezed my hand. I touched the pearl necklace at my throat, not as a reminder of my mother's lessons, but of my own strength. Ready to write a new story. The cameras turned toward me as I approached the podium, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly free of my mother's shadow. It was time to show the world what success really looks like when built on integrity instead of fear. The autumn breeze carried the scent of coffee and sea salt as I unlocked the door to our new offices. The renovated marina building that had once been the battlefield of my mother's last power play. Now it housed the headquarters of Stellar Network, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor where everything had changed. Morning, boss, Taya called from her desk, which was covered in event proposals. The Tokyo partnership papers just came in, and Joseph is waiting in your office with the quarterly reports. I smiled at the boss comment. Some things never changed, even if everything else had. Inside my office, Joseph was arranging papers with his usual precision. Please tell me those numbers are as good as last month's, I said, setting down my coffee. Better, he grinned, handing me the report. The Independent Planner Network has grown to 37 cities. Juliana's London office opens next week, and, he paused dramatically, the community center's youth business program just got full funding. Dad would have loved that, I said softly, touching the framed photo on my desk. My father and me at my first school business fair, using success to help others succeed. A knock at the door interrupted us. Elijah entered, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him during the trial. The sentencing hearing is tomorrow, he announced without preamble. They want you to make a statement. My stomach tightened. What's the prosecution asking for? 8 to 10 years plus restitution. He sat down heavily. Your mother's lawyers are pushing for house arrest, citing her contributions to the business community, and they want me to help decide her fate. I walked to the window, watching boats bob in the harbor. Perfect timing, as always. You don't have to? Yes, I do. I turned back to face them. But first, we have something more important to handle. Right on cue, Juliana burst in, tablet in hand. The first graduates of our small business mentorship program are here. 25 new entrepreneurs, ready to pitch their ideas. We headed to the conference room where nervous but excited faces greeted us. Young people clutching business plans, older folks with dreams of second careers, all of them ready to build something meaningful. "Welcome to Stellar Network," I began, looking at each face. "You're here because you have vision, drive, and integrity. 3 months ago, you joined our program with ideas. Today, you'll leave with the tools to make those ideas reality." One by one, they presented their plans: a sustainable catering company, an accessible event space, a tech platform connecting local vendors. Each presentation reminded me why we'd created this program. Halfway through, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother's lawyer. "Last chance to support leniency. Family should stick together." I typed back, "Family is about lifting each other up, not tearing each other down. See you at sentencing." The pitches continued, each one strengthening my resolve about tomorrow's hearing. When the last presenter finished, we handed out the grant certificates. Seed money for each new business. No strings attached. "This is what real power looks like," I told the group. "Not controlling others, but empowering them." Later, as we celebrated with champagne in my office, Taya asked the question they'd all been avoiding. "What are you going to say tomorrow?" "The truth." I picked up my father's photo. That actions have consequences. That success built on betrayal isn't success at all. And that true legacy isn't about what you take, but what you give back. "Your mother won't see it that way," Joseph warned. "No, she won't. But maybe someone else will." I showed them an email I'd received that morning from a young event planner thanking us for stopping predatory business practices in her city. "Maybe someone else will choose a different path because of this." Elijah raised his glass. "To choosing different paths. And to walking them together," Taya added. The sun was setting over the harbor as we finished our celebration. I stayed late, reviewing the day's pitches and finalizing tomorrow's statement. A text from an unknown number lit up my phone. "Mom asked me to beg for mercy. I won't. You taught me better than that. Your cousin Rachel." I smiled, remembering all the family gatherings where Rachel had watched silently as my mother orchestrated her power plays. Now she was finding her voice too. Standing at the window, I touched the pearl necklace, no longer a symbol of my mother's lessons, but of my own. The lights of small businesses dotted the shoreline, each one a story of dreams being built the right way. Tomorrow, I would face my mother one last time. But tonight, surrounded by the evidence of what we'd built from the ashes of her empire, I felt only peace. She had taught me about power, but I had learned about strength. She had shown me how to take, but I had discovered how to give. And in the end, that made all the difference.
I stood in front of the mirror in my wedding dress, holding back tears as I read the prenuptial agreement one last time. My hands trembled, and the paper crinkled under my tight grip. 3 hours before, I was supposed to say, "I do," and here I was, being forced to sign away my dreams. I'm destiny, and this should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, it became the day I learned exactly what kind of family I was marrying into. "Darling, you're not having second thoughts, are you?" Mark appeared in the doorway, looking handsome in his tuxedo, but wearing that familiar worried expression I'd grown to hate. "Father says everything needs to be finalized before the ceremony." "Your father can wait," I snapped, then immediately regretted my tone. I need a minute, Mark. This isn't what we discussed." He stepped closer, placing his hands on my shoulders. "It's just business, sweetheart. You know how important the family company is to Father. He just wants to protect our interests." "Our interests? Or his control?" I turned to face him. The original agreement was about assets. I waved the paper. "This is about forcing me to be a housewife. I have to give up any entrepreneurial pursuits or lose everything in a divorce. How is that fair? Father believes a woman's primary focus should be her family. You knew this about him." Mark's voice carried that patronizing tone that made my skin crawl. A knock at the door interrupted us. "5 minutes," Bruce's authoritative voice boomed through the wood. "The papers need to be signed, Destiny. Don't make this difficult. I caught my reflection again. The elegant white dress, the carefully styled hair, the makeup hiding my exhaustion from countless arguments about this very moment. My phone buzzed in my purse, and I fished it out to find a text from Marley. "Whatever happens, remember what we talked about. Check under your bouquet after the ceremony. You've got this, girl." "Destiny," Mark prompted, holding out a pen. I took it, my mind racing. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built in secret over the past year, my fledgling company, my dreams, my independence, all of it hung in the balance. Bruce thought he was clever, trying to clip my wings before I could fly. "Fine," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I'll sign." The scratch of pen on paper felt like nails on a chalkboard. Mark smiled, relief washing over his features as he took the document. "I'll get this to Father. See you at the altar, beautiful." The moment he left, I slumped into a chair, careful not to wrinkle the dress. Marley burst in seconds later, her bridesmaid dress swishing around her legs. "Tell me you didn't," she said, eyes wide. "I did what I had to do." I stood, straightening my spine. But Bruce Russell doesn't know me as well as he thinks he does. "Girl, when he finds out—" "He won't," I cut her off. "Not until it's too late. The company's registered under a different name, the investors are all silent partners, and everything's through shell corporations. I've covered my tracks." Marley handed me my bouquet, a knowing look in her eyes. "There's something else you should know about the Russells. I found out—" Another knock interrupted us. "It's time," my mother called through the door. "Tell me later," I whispered to Marley as we hurried to take our positions. The ceremony passed in a blur of white tulle and hollow promises. I said "I do" to a man I loved but didn't trust, joined a family that saw me as property rather than a person, and smiled for photographs that would forever capture this beautiful lie. At the reception, while Mark was distracted by well-wishers, I finally checked under my bouquet. There, tucked into the ribbon, was a folded note from Marley. "Bruce Russell's empire isn't as solid as everyone thinks. His new VP John has been looking for a way out. Thought you might want to know. Time to show them what you're really made of." I smiled, tucking the note into my bodice. Bruce thought this prenup would keep me in line, force me to be the obedient wife he wanted for his son. He had no idea that he'd just given me all the motivation I needed to bring his empire crashing down around him. Let him think he'd won. Let him believe I'd submit to his rules and expectations. I'd sign his papers, play his game, be the perfect daughter-in-law on the surface. But underneath, I was already several moves ahead in a game he didn't even know we were playing. "To the happy couple," Bruce's voice boomed across the reception hall, raising his glass in a toast. I raised mine in return, meeting his satisfied smirk with a practiced smile. "To family," I replied, even as I silently added, "and to karma." 6 months into my marriage, I'd perfected the art of deception. Every morning, I kissed Mark goodbye as he left for the family company, then transformed our guest house into my secret headquarters. Today was different, though. Today was the first major client meeting for my startup, albeit under an alias. "Your coffee, Mrs. Perfect Housewife," Marley teased, handing me a steaming cup as she entered through the back door. "Ready to switch into CEO mode?" God, yes. I kicked off my house slippers and pulled my power suit from its hiding place in a garment bag. "The investors are meeting us at 11. Did you bring the presentations?" "All here." She patted her laptop bag. "But heads up, I saw Bruce's car heading this way when I turned onto your street." "What?" I nearly spilled my coffee. "He never comes here during the day." I rushed to the window, spotting his Mercedes pulling into the driveway. "Quick, grab everything and hide in the bathroom. I'll get rid of him." I barely had time to throw on an apron over my business attire before the doorbell rang. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door with my best surprise smile. "Bruce." What an unexpected pleasure. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Just checking on my daughter-in-law, making sure you're settling into your role properly." His eyes scanned the living room, always searching for imperfections. Of course, I was just about to start preparing lunch for Mark. I gestured toward the kitchen, praying he wouldn't notice the financial documents I'd forgotten to hide on the coffee table. Wonderful. He picked up a magazine from the side table. Though I notice you're still subscribing to Business Weekly. Hardly appropriate reading material for a Russell wife, wouldn't you say? I forced a laugh. Oh, that's Mark's. I just like looking at the pretty office furniture in the ads. A toilet flushed upstairs, and I silently thanked Marley for her quick thinking in establishing our cover story. Marley's here. Bruce's expression soured. That girl's a bad influence. Always was, even in college. She's just helping me plan Mark's birthday party, I lied smoothly. Would you like some coffee? No time, but speaking of parties, he sat down uninvited. The annual company gala is next month. I expect you to take charge of the planning, show everyone what a proper Russell wife can do. I'd be honored. I smiled, already calculating how I could use the event to my advantage. My phone buzzed, a text from our potential investors asking where we were. I discreetly silenced it. One more thing, Bruce added, standing. I heard rumors about a new tech startup making waves in our market. Some woman CEO nobody's heard of. Keep your ears open at those housewife lunches you attend. Any information could be useful. I walked him to the door, maintaining my perfect daughter-in-law facade. Of course, Bruce. I'll let you know if I hear anything. The moment his car disappeared, Marley burst out of hiding. That was too close. Also, we're now officially late. No, I said, grabbing my briefcase. We're exactly where we need to be. Bruce just gave me an idea. 20 minutes later, we walked into a private room at the city's most exclusive restaurant. 5 investors waited, along with John, Bruce's VP, who'd been secretly feeding us information. Gentlemen, I said, stepping to the head of the table. Thank you for your patience. Today, we're not just discussing a new tech platform. We're talking about disrupting an entire industry that's been dominated by dinosaurs for too long. Bold words, one investor said, but why should we trust an unknown? I pulled up our projections. Because while the old guard was busy underestimating people like me, I built this. I clicked through slides showing our beta test results. 300% growth in 6 months, all under the radar. And next month, at the Russell Corp Gala, we go public. That's risky, John warned. Bruce will be too busy watching his empire crumble to stop us. I laid out my plan, watching their expressions shift from skepticism to interest. 2 hours later, we had their commitment. $30 million in funding, contingent on our public launch. You're either brilliant or crazy, Marley said as we headed back. Maybe both. I'm just getting started. I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from Mark. The real question is, who's going to crack first, my marriage or Bruce's company? Speaking of cracks, Marley hesitated. I overheard something at the country club yesterday about Bruce and some questionable dealings in his past, the kind that could ruin more than just business. I pulled over, turning to face her. Tell me everything. As she spoke, I realized the game was bigger than I'd imagined. Bruce hadn't just tried to control my future. He'd built his entire empire on secrets and lies. And now, I had the power to expose them all. My phone buzzed again. Mark calling. It was time to go home and play the perfect wife, at least for a little while longer. The Russell Corp lobby buzzed with activity as I brought Mark his forgotten lunch, playing the dutiful wife while secretly scanning for familiar faces. That's when I spotted Cade, my brother-in-law, watching me with an intensity that made me nervous. Destiny. He caught up to me by the elevators. We need to talk, privately. I hesitated, clutching Mark's lunch bag. I really should get this too. It's about Bruce. His voice dropped. And what he's planning. My heart skipped, but I kept my expression neutral. Fine, 5 minutes. We took the elevator to the empty conference floor. Through the glass walls, the city sprawled beneath us, oblivious to the power plays happening in this building. I know what you're doing, Cade said without preamble. The startup, the secret meetings, all of it. My fingers tightened on my purse strap. I don't know what you're talking about. Cut the act. He pulled out his phone, showing me photos. Me entering investor meetings, Marley carrying documents, John leaving my office. I'm not the enemy here, Destiny, but you need to be more careful. Are you blackmailing me? I'm warning you, Bruce knows something's happening in his market. He's hired private investigators. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your husband isn't as loyal as you think. Check his deleted emails. A friend. Who else knows? I demanded, showing Cade the message. Not from me. He ran a hand through his hair. But listen, Bruce didn't just strong-arm you with that prenup. He's done it before. To my wife, to other family members. He's got dirt on everyone. Why are you telling me this? Because someone needs to stop him. And you, he smiled slightly, you might actually be smart enough to do it. The elevator dinged, and Mark stepped out. Destiny? Cade? What's going on? Just bumped into each other, I said smoothly, holding up the lunch bag. Brought your favorite. Mark looked between us suspiciously. Father's looking for you, Cade. Something about the merger documents. Right. Cade headed for the elevator, but not before giving me a meaningful look. Be careful who you trust, Destiny. That evening, I sat in my home office, Mark's laptop open before me. His password had been easy to guess, our wedding date. The deleted emails loaded slowly, each one a potential landmine. Oh my God, I whispered, reading through threads between Mark and Bruce. They'd been discussing ways to keep me occupied with charity work, planning to set me up with meaningless projects to keep me from getting dangerous ideas. A soft knock startled me. Destiny? It was Mark. I quickly closed the laptop. Come in. He entered, looking troubled. Father wants us over for dinner tomorrow. Says it's important. Of course. I stood, kissing his cheek. Everything okay? Just business stuff. A new competitor's causing problems. Father's worried. I kept my face carefully blank. Anything I can do? Actually, he hesitated. Father thinks you might be helpful. Apparently, this competitor is a woman, someone who moves in social circles. He thought you might have heard something. My phone buzzed again. Another anonymous text. Bruce knows more than he's letting on. Watch your back. Destiny. Mark touched my arm. You seem distracted lately. Just tired. I forced a smile. Planning the gala is a lot of work. About that, he shifted uncomfortably. Father wants to move it up. Says we need to make a big announcement. What kind of announcement? Can't say yet, but it's big. Could change everything. After he left, I called Marley. We need to move faster. Bruce is planning something. Already on it, she replied. But you need to see this. Remember that dirt I mentioned? I found proof. Meeting in 20 at the usual place. I grabbed my keys, then stopped. A new email had just arrived from another anonymous account. Your company isn't the only thing at risk. Some secrets are worth killing for. My hand shook as I deleted it. The stakes were getting higher, and I wasn't sure who to trust anymore. Cade seemed genuine, but he was still Bruce's family. The anonymous messages could be warnings or traps. One thing was certain, Bruce was making his move, and I needed to be ready. The gala wasn't just going to be an announcement, it was going to be a battlefield. I texted Marley back. On my way. Time to show Bruce what happens when you underestimate the wrong woman. As I drove through the darkening city, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The game had changed. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about survival. The restaurant's private room felt like a pressure cooker as I sat across from Evangeline, my supposed rival in the tech industry. Bruce had no idea he'd just introduced me to my perfect smokescreen. So, Evangeline stirred her coffee. You're the mysterious wife I've heard so much about. Bruce seems quite interested in my company lately. And I'm interested in why you agreed to meet me. I slid a folder across the table. Especially given these numbers, She opened it, her eyes widening at the documents Cade had secretly provided. Where did you get these? Let's just say we have a mutual problem wearing expensive suits and wielding too much power. Bruce. She practically spat the name. He's been trying to force a hostile takeover of my company. These projections would give him everything he needs. Unless, I leaned forward, we help each other. The waiter arrived with our lunch, and we paused until he left. I could see the wheels turning in Evangeline's head as she processed my unspoken proposition. You're her, aren't you? She lowered her voice. The actual competitor Bruce is really worried about. I smiled. What would you say if I were? Before she could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Where are you? Father's called an emergency board meeting. Says it's about the mystery company. Looks like our time's up, I said, standing. Think about my offer. Bruce is planning something big at the gala, and we both know he doesn't play fair. Back at Russell Corp, I slipped into the board meeting viewing gallery just as Bruce started speaking. From my hidden vantage point, I could see everything while remaining unseen. Ladies and gentlemen, Bruce's voice boomed through the room. We have a crisis. This unknown company isn't just stealing our market share, they're using insider information. My heart raced as he pulled up familiar-looking projections. Not mine, Evangeline's. I propose an immediate acquisition of Stone Technologies, Bruce continued. We eliminate one threat while sending a message to anyone else thinking of challenging us. I texted Evangeline. Bruce took the bait. You know what to do. Seconds later, her reply came. Press release going out now. Let the games begin. On cue, phones around the boardroom started buzzing. Bruce's presentation froze as notifications poured in. Sir, his assistant burst in. Stone Technologies just announced a merger with Pacific Digital. They're out of our reach now. Bruce's face turned red. That's impossible. The numbers showed. The numbers were wrong. John spoke up, his voice steady. Maybe we should focus on our own company's vulnerabilities instead of chasing competitors. I smiled in my hidden spot. John had played his part perfectly, feeding Bruce exactly the information we wanted him to see. Later that evening, I was in my home office when Mark stormed in. Did you know about this? Father's furious. Know about what, honey? I looked up innocently from my gala planning notes. Evangeline Stone. She played us. Father's convinced there's a leak in the company. He ran his hands through his hair. He wants me to start investigating everyone, even family members. That sounds stressful. I stood, straightening his tie. Maybe you should distance yourself from it. Let your father handle his own battles. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. I kissed his cheek. Just don't want you getting caught in the crossfire when things go wrong. His eyes narrowed. When? Don't you mean if? Before I could respond, both our phones chimed. Another anonymous message. The gala guest list includes someone who knows all of Bruce's secrets. Choose your allies carefully. What the hell? Mark stared at his screen. Who's sending these? Probably someone trying to cause trouble. I kept my voice calm while my mind raced. This wasn't part of my plan. You should show your father. No, he said slowly. No, I don't think I will. Something's not right here, Destiny, and I'm starting to wonder if you know more than you're saying. I met his gaze steadily. Do you really want to know the truth, Mark? About your father? About this company? Because once you do, there's no going back. He stepped back, conflict clear on his face. I need to think. After he left, I called Cade. Mark's wavering. We need to move faster. Already done, he replied. Just got word. Bruce's biggest client is pulling out tomorrow. He doesn't know yet. I looked at my calendar, where the gala date was circled in red. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to either secure my victory or lose everything. One more thing, Cade added. Watch out for Evangeline. She might be playing both sides. I hung up, staring at my reflection in the window. The perfect wife was cracking, revealing the CEO beneath. Soon, everyone would see exactly who I really was. And Bruce? Bruce would see it last of all. The Russell Corp lobby erupted in chaos as reporters swarmed the entrance. I stood in the background, watching Bruce try to manage the fallout from losing his biggest client. "This is a temporary setback," he announced, his usual confidence cracking slightly. Russell Corp remained stronger than ever. "Is it true the client cited ethical concerns?" a reporter shouted. "No comment," Bruce snapped, retreating toward the elevators. I followed at a distance, slipping into the same elevator just before the doors closed. We were alone. "Rough morning?" I asked innocently. Bruce's eyes narrowed. "Don't get smug, Destiny. This doesn't concern you." "Actually," I pulled out my phone, showing him an email. "It does. The country club board wants to know if we should postpone the gala, given the circumstances. The gala proceeds as planned." His voice turned to steel. "In fact, move it up to next week. I have a special announcement to make." The elevator stopped at his floor. Before exiting, he turned to me. "Oh, and Destiny, tell your friend Evangeline that playing both sides is a dangerous game." My blood ran cold. As soon as he left, I texted Marley. "He knows something. Meet me at the cafe." 20 minutes later, Marley slid into the booth across from me. "It's worse than we thought." Evangeline talked. "What?" "She met with Bruce this morning, offered to help him identify his real competition in exchange for a board seat." I gripped my coffee cup. "That backstabbing." "Destiny?" Mark's voice made me jump. He stood by our table, looking confused. "I thought you were planning the gala today." "Just taking a quick break," I said smoothly. "Want to join us?" "Actually, yes." He sat down, his expression serious. "We need to talk about father." Marley stood. "I should go." "No," Mark said. "Stay. I think you both need to hear this." He pulled out a USB drive. "I found something in Father's private files about what really happened to my mother's company before she died." My heart raced. "Mark," "He destroyed her," Mark's voice cracked. "She built something amazing, and he crushed it because he couldn't control her. Just like..." He looked at me meaningfully. "Just like he's trying to do to me?" Mark nodded slowly. "I saw the prenup, Destiny. The real one, not the version you signed. Father altered it after you signed. It's fraud." Marley gasped. I reached for Mark's hand. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to start my own investigation." He squeezed my hand. "I know about your company, Destiny. I've known for months." The cafe seemed to freeze around us. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I needed to be sure whose side I was on." He slid the USB drive to me. "Now I am. Father's going to announce a major restructuring at the gala. He's planning to seize control of all family assets, including any hidden companies he discovers." "He can't do that," Marley protested. "He can with these documents." Mark tapped the drive. "Unless someone stops him." My phone buzzed. A text from Cade. "Bruce called an emergency board meeting. John's been fired." "It's starting," I muttered, showing them the message. "There's more," Mark said. "Father's been moving money offshore. Millions. The company's nearly bankrupt, but he's been hiding it from everyone." I stood abruptly. "I need to make some calls." "Destiny," Mark caught my arm. "Whatever you're planning, I want to help." "It's dangerous." "I know." He smiled sadly. "But it's time someone stood up to him. Mother would have wanted that." Back at my office, I gathered my team via secure video call. John, newly fired but still holding key information. Cade, with his inside access. Marley, my most trusted ally. And now Mark, finally choosing a side. "Bruce moved the gala up for a reason," I explained. "He's desperate. The company's failing, and he's planning one last power grab." "The press is already suspicious," John added. "One more scandal could topple everything." "Then let's give them one," I said, pulling up documents on my screen. Bruce's offshore accounts, the fraudulent prenup, his history of destroying family businesses. Everything goes public at the gala. "He'll fight back," Cade warned. "Let him." I smiled grimly. "I've got one card left to play, something not even Evangeline knows about." My phone lit up with another anonymous message. Bruce knows more than you think. The gala will be his triumph or his downfall. Choose wisely. I looked at my unlikely team of allies. 1 week. We have 1 week to end this. Mark squeezed my shoulder. We're ready. But as everyone signed off, I wondered if we really were. Bruce had spent decades building his empire of lies. Taking it down would require perfect timing, absolute trust, and a willingness to risk everything. The gala wouldn't just be an event anymore. It would be a reckoning. 3 days before the gala, I found Bruce waiting in my home office. He sat in my chair, holding a familiar-looking file. Interesting reading material, he said, tapping the folder. For a housewife. I closed the door behind me. We both know I was never just a housewife. No. He stood slowly. You're something far more dangerous. A woman who thinks she can play in a man's world. Is that what you told Mark's mother before you destroyed her company? His face darkened. Careful, Destiny. You're treading on thin ice. Actually, I moved to my desk. I think you're the one who should be careful. I opened my laptop, turning it to face him. Offshore accounts, fraudulent documents, decades of systematic destruction of family businesses. The press would love this story. You're bluffing. Try me. I pulled up more files. Did you really think I wouldn't find out about the real prenup? The one you altered after I signed? A knock interrupted us. Mark entered, freezing when he saw his father. What's going on? Your wife, Bruce spat, is threatening me. No, I corrected. I'm promising you. The gala's in 3 days. Step down quietly, or everything goes public. Bruce laughed, but I caught the fear in his eyes. You'll destroy this family. You already did that, Mark said quietly. I found Mum's letters. Bruce's composure cracked. Your mother was weak. She would have ruined everything I built. Built? I scoffed. You mean stolen, manipulated, destroyed? My phone buzzed. Marley. Evangeline's talking to the press. Turn on the news now. I grabbed the remote, switching on the office TV. Evangeline stood at a podium, looking perfectly poised. And while I cannot name names at this time, I can confirm that major revelations about Russell Corp will be made at the upcoming gala. Bruce's face went pale. You conspired with her? No, I smiled. She conspired with me. Those documents you saw about her company, all part of the plan. You don't have the courage to destroy everything, Bruce challenged. Watch me. I pressed send on an email I'd prepared. I just released proof of your offshore accounts to the board. Consider it a preview of coming attractions. His phone immediately began ringing. He glanced at it, then back at me. This isn't over. Actually, it is. Mark stepped between us. Leave, Father, while you still have a choice. After Bruce stormed out, Mark turned to me. Are you okay? No, I admitted, but I will be. Did you secure the evidence from his office? Everything's here. He patted his briefcase. Cade's got copies too, just in case. My phone rang. John calling. Bruce just called an emergency shareholder meeting for tomorrow morning. He's trying to force a vote before the gala. Let him try, I said. We've got the proxy votes locked up, thanks to you and Cade. After hanging up, I found Mark staring at me. What? He shook his head. I can't believe I never saw it before. How brilliant you are. How much like my mother. Mark, no, let me finish. I was a coward, letting him control everything, letting him do to you what he did to her. He took my hands. Whatever happens next, I'm with you. Another text buzzed through, anonymous again. Bruce has one last card to play. Watch out for the silent partner. Silent partner? Mark frowned. What silent partner? A horrible realization hit me. The gala venue, who owns it? Mark's eyes widened. Father's old friend Patrick. Why? I was already dialing Marley. Get the venue changed. Now. Bruce is going to try to stop the gala entirely. On it, she replied. But Destiny, there's something else. Remember those documents about Bruce's past? There's a name that keeps coming up. Someone who helped him take down your mother-in-law's company. Who? Patrick. I looked at Mark, seeing the same understanding dawn on his face. Bruce hadn't just been building an empire. He'd been building a network of conspirators, each one helping him destroy anyone who threatened his control. The gala's not enough, I realized. We need to expose everyone. It'll cause a scandal that'll rock the whole business community, Mark warned. Good. I started typing rapidly. Let it burn. Let all their lies burn. My phone lit up with another anonymous message. Tomorrow's shareholder meeting is a trap. Bruce knows about the proxy votes. Be ready. I showed Mark the message. Still with me? He kissed me softly. Always. But destiny. Whatever happens tomorrow. I know. I squeezed his hand. No going back now. The next 24 hours would either see Bruce's empire fall or everything I'd built crumble to dust. And somewhere in the shadows, Patrick waited, Bruce's silent partner in a decades-long game of destruction. The real battle was just beginning. The gala ballroom hummed with tension as I adjusted my midnight blue gown. Reporters lined the entrance, their cameras flashing like lightning before a storm. Bruce stood at the podium, looking confident despite everything. Too confident. Something's wrong, Marley whispered, appearing beside me. Patrick's men are at every exit. Doesn't matter. I checked my phone one last time. Everything's in place. Bruce tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Tonight marks a new chapter for Russell Corp. I caught Mark's eye across the room. He nodded slightly, phone ready. Before we begin, Bruce continued, I'd like to address the recent rumors about our company. They are, of course, completely false. In fact, the lights went out. When they came back on seconds later, the giant screens behind Bruce weren't showing his prepared presentation. Instead, documents began scrolling. Bank statements, emails, contracts. 2 decades of corruption exposed in high definition. What is this? Bruce demanded, but his microphone had gone dead. Mine, however, worked perfectly. The truth, Bruce. My voice rang through the ballroom as I walked toward the stage. Every dirty deal, every destroyed company, every life you've ruined, all of it, documented and verified. Security, Bruce shouted. They're not your security anymore, Cade called out, emerging from the crowd. The board voted an hour ago. You're out, Bruce. Patrick surged forward. This is illegal. You can't. Actually, we can. John stepped up, holding a tablet. Especially with your signed confession. Patrick's face went white. I never signed anything. No, I smiled. But your wife did, after we showed her proof of your affair with her sister. Amazing what people will reveal when they're angry. Reporters were going crazy, cameras flashing, questions flying. Bruce grabbed my arm. You think you've won? He hissed. I still own everything. The prenup is void, Mark interrupted, joining us on stage. Because you committed fraud when you altered it after signing. Remember, Father, I found the original. Bruce's grip tightened. You ungrateful. Let her go. Evangeline's voice cut through the chaos. She strode forward, phone recording. Unless you want assault added to your charges. He released me, looking around wildly as his world crumbled. Board members were already talking to the press. Patrick was being led away by security. The screens kept scrolling, showing proof of every crime, every manipulation. You don't understand, Bruce pleaded, his composure finally breaking. I built this company. No, I corrected him. You stole this company. Just like you stole Mark's mother's company. Just like you tried to steal my dreams. I turned to address the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce myself properly. I'm Destiny, CEO of Phoenix Technologies, the company that's been outperforming Russell Corp for the past year. The room erupted. Bruce lunged for me, but Mark intercepted him. It's over, Father, Mark said firmly. The board has voted. The police are waiting outside. Walk out with dignity or be dragged out. Your choice. Bruce straightened his tie, his mask of control slipping back into place. You'll regret this. All of you. No, I said softly. The only regret here is that it took so long to stop you. As security escorted Bruce out, reporters swarmed the stage. Questions flew from every direction. Did Bruce really destroy his daughter-in-law's company? How long has Phoenix Technologies been operating in secret? Mr. Russell, did you know about your wife's company? Mark took my hand, facing the cameras. My wife built something amazing while fighting against systematic oppression and manipulation. She's not just a CEO, she's a revolution. Marley appeared with champagne. The board wants to talk to you both. They're voting on new leadership in 10 minutes. I turned to Mark. Are you ready for this? Together, he smiled, we can rebuild everything. The right way this time. The next hour passed in a blur of interviews, congratulations, and board meetings. By midnight, it was official. Mark and I would co-lead the merged companies, with a board selected for ethics and innovation, rather than loyalty to Bruce. As the crowd thinned, I found a moment alone on the balcony. My phone buzzed one last time. The anonymous number. Justice served. Your mother-in-law would be proud. M. I smiled, finally understanding who had been helping us all along. Mark's mother wasn't dead as Bruce had claimed. She'd been watching, waiting, helping us expose the truth. Destiny. Mark joined me outside. The press wants one more statement. I looked at my husband, seeing him clearly for the first time, not as Bruce's son, but as his mother's child, strong, ethical, ready to right old wrongs. Let's give them something to remember, I said, taking his hand. Together, we walked back into the light, leaving Bruce's empire of shadows behind us. The game was over. Truth had won. And somewhere out there, a woman who'd lost everything was finally seeing justice served. The morning sun streamed through my office window, my real office, not the hidden one in the guest house. On my desk, newspapers splashed headlines about Bruce's arrest and the corporate merger. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the gala. Your 9 o'clock is here, my assistant announced through the intercom. Send her in. The door opened, and I stood, my heart racing. A woman with Mark's eyes entered, elegant, poised, and very much alive. Margaret, I breathed. Hello, Destiny. She smiled, the same smile I'd seen in old photos. I believe we have a lot to discuss. We sat in the comfortable chairs by the window rather than at my desk. Professional barriers seemed pointless now. The anonymous texts, I said. That was you. Among other things. She pulled out a familiar USB drive. I've spent years gathering evidence against Bruce, waiting for someone strong enough to use it. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Bruce's threats weren't empty. He had proof of certain questionable decisions I made trying to save my company. If I surfaced, he would have destroyed more than just me. A knock interrupted us. Mark entered, freezing when he saw his mother. Mum? The reunion that followed brought tears to my eyes. Mother and son embracing, years of separation dissolving in moments. I'm so sorry, Margaret whispered to Mark. I wanted to tell you, but I understand now, he said. After seeing what Father did to Destiny, I understand everything. My phone buzzed. Marley. Bruce is requesting a meeting. Says he has one last deal to offer. I showed the message to Margaret and Mark. Go, Margaret said firmly. End this properly. The prison visiting room was cold and stark. Bruce sat waiting, orange jumpsuit replacing his designer suits, but his arrogance remained intact. Destiny, he nodded as I sat. I see Margaret's resurfaced. Your last play failed, Bruce. What do you want? To make a deal. I have other accounts, other resources. Help reduce my sentence, and half of it is yours. I laughed. You still don't get it, do you? This was never about money. Then what? He leaned forward. Revenge? Power? Don't pretend you're better than me. No, Bruce. This was about justice. For Margaret, for every woman you've tried to control, for every dream you've crushed. Dreams? He scoffed. I built an empire. And now you'll watch from in here as we transform it into something better. I stood. Goodbye, Bruce. Wait! His composure cracked. Please, Mark's all I have left. You lost Mark the moment you tried to make him choose between his mother's memory and your control. I turned back at the door. By the way, I'm pregnant. Your grandchild will never know you existed. Back at the office, I found Cade waiting with Marley and John. Board approved the new structure, Cade reported. You and Mark as co-CEOs, Margaret heading the charitable foundation. And Evangeline, I asked, agreed to the merger terms. She's taking Asia operations. My office door opened again. Patrick's wife entered, holding more documents. Found these in his private safe, she said. Thought you might want them for the prosecution. Thank you, Sandra. I took the files. The foundation's legal team will handle your divorce pro bono. She smiled tearfully. Thank you for helping me find my courage. As the day wound down, I found myself back in my office with Mark and Margaret. The press wants interviews, Mark said. Stories of redemption, women in business, corporate reform. Let them wait, Margaret replied. Family comes first. Isn't that right, Destiny? I touched my stomach, still flat, but holding our future. Yes, family first, but on our terms this time. Speaking of terms, Mark pulled out an envelope. I had our lawyers draw something up. Inside was a new contract, not a prenup, but a partnership agreement. Equal shares, equal power, equal respect. No more secrets, Mark said. No more hidden agendas. No more hiding, I agreed, signing the document. Margaret took it next, signing as witness. Now, about my grandchild. We laughed, the sound echoing through an office that had seen too many dark deals and not enough joy. My phone buzzed one last time. Marley had sent a photo of Bruce's empty office being transformed into a women's mentorship center. Ready to build something new? Mark asked, taking my hand. I looked at my family. Not the one I'd married into, but the one we'd forged through truth and trust. Margaret, who'd lost everything but gained it back through patience and courage. Mark, who'd chosen love over power. Our unborn child, who would inherit a legacy of strength rather than manipulation. Yes, I said, let's build something extraordinary. Together, we walk toward the future, not as Russell Corp's heirs, but as architects of change. Bruce's empire had fallen, but from its ashes, we would rise stronger, wiser, and unafraid. The game was over. Life was just beginning.